case of Pam Hupp. Pam Hupp was born on October 20th, 1958 in Delwood, Missouri, as the second child to the Newman family. She married Mark Hupp, and they had 2 children together. In 2001, the family relocated to Fallon, Missouri. Pam had a varied work history, eventually working as administrator for State Farm until 2010, when she stopped working due to back and leg pain. During this time, she started filing disability claims. On August 16, 2016, around noon, Louis Gumpenberger, a mentally challenged man who had been struggling with mental and physical disabilities since a car crash in 2005, died after being shot 5 times by Pam Hupp in her apartment. Earlier that day, Pam called 911, reporting a robbery. According to Pam, Gumpenberger had jumped out of a vehicle driven by another person, attacked her with a knife while she was in her SUV, and she claimed she slapped the knife away with a karate chop. Pam said she then ran into her house, grabbed her Ruger LCR from the nightstand, and shot Gumpenberger 5 times in self-defense. She alleged that Gumpenberger ordered her to drive him to the bank to withdraw Russ's money, and claimed that Gumpenberger attacked her in her driveway. Russ was Russ Faria, a man wrongly convicted of murdering his wife Betsy in 2011. At the crime scene, the police found 9 $100 bills on Betsy's body, along with a handwritten note addressed to her. The note contained chilling instructions for the killer, detailing what they needed to do at Pam's apartment. Firstly, they had to retrieve Russ's money. Then they would take Pam into the house, kill her, and make it look like Russ's wife was responsible. The murderer wanted Pam's life to end in a specific way. They even specified that the knife should be left sticking out of her neck. They were willing to pay Gumpenberger a hefty sum of $10,000 for completing the task. Pam Hupp was arrested for murder. However, truth behind Gumpenberger's death emerged when Pam voluntarily visited O'Fallon police. During her interview, Pam asked if it be recorded, citing her TV appearances with KTVI's Chris Hayes, whom she blamed for attracting criminals. According to the Fallon chief of police and the prosecuting attorney of St. Charles County, Pam had lured Gumpenberger into her home by posing as a television producer named Kathy. She pretended this was for a TV show and tricked him into reenacting a 911 emergency call, providing a perfect cover for the horrific crime she was about to commit. After murdering Gumpenberger, Pam wrote a note that was later found on his body. The police were convinced that Pam was a ruthless killer due to the overwhelming evidence they discovered, including the $100 bills found on the deceased body. It was later revealed that Pam had planted these bills on Gumpenberger's body. Significantly, the 10th $100 bill was found in Pam's dresser, and its serial number was sequential with 3 of the other $100 bills found on the body. The St. Charles County Police subsequently reopened a complaint filed on August 10, 2016, by Carol Alford, who reported a woman matching Pam's description. This woman had approached Alford, offering to pay her $1,000 to participate in a fake 911 call, and was driving an SUV identical to Pam's. It emerged that Carol Alford was not the only one with a similar complaint. Brent Harleton informed the police that Pam had made him the same offer less than an hour before she shot Gumpenberger. Pam claimed in her interview that she had never met Gumpenberger before, but phone records showed that she had been at his doorstep. Further investigation revealed that Pam owned the knife she claimed Gumpenberger used to attack her, which she had purchased along with other items at a store in O'Fallon. It was also discovered that Pam had a habit of storing her knife between her kitchen counter and stove, similar to how the knife was found in her car, wedged between the passenger seat and central console. During a search of her home, police found a carpet swatch that seemed to be placed to protect her rug from Gumpenberger's blood. The police had doubts about Gumpenberger's ability to commit the crime due to his mental state. It became clear that Pam was guilty when she shot Gumpenberger, apparently trying to protect her rug from blood. On August 23, 2016, Pam Hupp was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. When she was arrested, she asked to use the restroom and then attempted to take her own life by stabbing her wrist and neck with a ballpoint pen. Fortunately, she failed. Pam made her first court appearance on January 30th, 2017, where St. Charles County Assistant Prosecutor Phil Groenweg argued that her actions demonstrated a consciousness of guilt. Pam Hupp was convicted on all charges by a grand jury in December 2016 and was given a $2 million bail. Her trial began in 2017, during which she pleaded not guilty, prompting the prosecutor to seek the death penalty. They argued that she had made a decision to target Gumpenberger as her victim. In June 2019, Pam entered an Alford plea, effectively withdrawing her request for a jury trial and avoiding the death penalty. Following her guilty plea, she was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole in August 2019. After her sentencing, Pam called her then-husband, Matt Hupp, and admitted to killing Louis Gumpenberger to spare their family the ordeal of a distressing trial. The trial exposed a disturbing aspect of Pam's character, revealing a shocking truth that horrified the police, judges, and the entire nation. In June 2016, Judge Cunningham ruled that evidence related to the brutal murder of Betsy Faria could be presented in court, leading to the reopening of the Betsy Faria case. Betsy Faria, born Elizabeth K. Meyer Faria, resided in Troy, Missouri, where she worked alongside Pam at State Farm as a life insurance administrator. In 2010, Betsy was diagnosed with cancer, and by October 2011, she had discovered that it had spread to her liver, leaving her with only a few months to live. Prior to her death, on December 22, 2011, Betsy altered the sole beneficiary of her $150,000 life insurance policy, replacing her husband, Russ Faria, with Pam Hupp, without informing him or their daughters of the change. Pam later claimed that Betsy had instructed her to establish a trust fund for her daughters until they came of age. However, Pam subsequently alleged that Betsy had wanted her to keep the money for herself, citing a previously undisclosed romantic relationship between the two women before Betsy's death. Betsy's daughters became suspicious and took Pam to court in 2014, but their attempt to retrieve their mother's life insurance fund from Pam and her husband Matt was dismissed by the court. In 2016, Russ took legal action against State Farm. 5 days after Betsy made Pam Hupp the sole beneficiary of her life insurance policy on December 22, 2011, Betsy attended a chemotherapy session at the Alvin J. Siteman Cancer Center, which left her weakened. Afterwards, she went to her mother's house as planned, where Russ was supposed to pick her up or she would stay overnight. However, Pam Hupp unexpectedly arrived at Betsy's mother's house and offered to drive Betsy home, claiming she dropped her off around 7 p.m. Betsy's daughter later stated that her mother missed her call at approximately 7:21 p.m. By 9:40 p.m., Russ made an emergency call to 911, frantically reporting that his wife Betsy had taken her own life. Russ spent the evening at his friend Michael Corbin's house, watching movies from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Afterwards, he drove to Arby's Lake in St. Louis before heading back home. When Russ called for help, the first responders arrived about 10 minutes later. Upon examining the scene, they immediately ruled out the possibility of suicide. Betsy's body was found lying on her right side, with 55 stab wounds and a wrist cut to the bone. A kitchen knife was lodged in her neck, and another knife was discovered under her pillow. Notably, there were no bloodstains or footprints near the entrance of the house. The estimated time of Betsy's death was determined to be between 7:20 p.m. and 9:41 p.m. Fingers pointed to Russ Faria as the main suspect after his wife's murder. Authorities believed he had a motive due to being denied $150,000. Russ was arrested a day after the murder and charged with first-degree murder, despite claiming innocence. A pair of blood-stained slippers were found in his closet, and he failed a polygraph test. The police deemed his demeanor suspicious and erratic. Russ's bail was set at $250,000, which he couldn't pay, so he was jailed until his November 18th trial. Pam told police Russ was violent, a heavy drinker, and had threatened Betsy before. With a $150,000 motive, it was easy to suspect him. Russ's trial was an extremely challenging and brutal process. According to his lawyer Joel Schwartz, Russ maintained his innocence, stating that he was with friends on the night in question, and they corroborated his alibi. Furthermore, Russ had purchased food from a store, making it practically impossible for him to have committed the crime in question. The prosecutor countered that Russ's friends were in on it, lying about his whereabouts and maybe even helping him. The judge, Christina Menem, refused to let Schwartz present evidence pointing to an alternative suspect, Pam, despite strong evidence of her motive and suspicious behavior. She claimed to have put $100,000 from insurance into a trust fund for her sister's daughters, but later admitted to keeping it for herself. She didn't want others to have it, so she implied she wanted someone else to have it. A detective reported a crime scene camera malfunction, causing key photos to be lost. Despite the odds, Russ was convicted of murder and armed criminal action, sentenced to life plus 30 years. Before Russ's retrial, her lawyer obtained the photos showing no blood trail. He's still trying to find out who sent them to him. Betsy Pam's case took a welcome turn during re-examination. At trial, her sister Camp testified that Russ was devastated when his wife removed him from her insurance policy. Russ had pressed a pillow to Camp's face. Russ's friends were accused of being accessories to murder, but no charges were filed. After 4 years in prison, Russ's attorney appealed the conviction in 2015. However, a judge rejected a review of the case in 2013. In 2014, KTVI and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch reinvestigated the case, unveiling suspicious facts about Betsy's death and the killer's identity. Pam Hupp's alibi was discredited due to contradictory statements, and it was revealed she lied about not being in the Furia home. The fact that Pam was completely forgotten about in the murder case was not only shocking to Schwartz and Russ, but some members of the Lincoln County Sheriff's Department had also been confused as to why Pam was not being investigated as a possible suspect in the case. In an interview, an officer had shared how shocked he was when no one was looking in Pam's direction. Everyone had been fixated on Russ. Media exposed prosecuting attorney ASI's effort to imprison Russ, revealing her relationships with the captain of investigations, Mike Lang, and a lead investigator prosecuting witness. This led to a retrial in 2015 with a new judge, Christina Menem, initially presiding. After Menem's recusal, Judge Stephen R. granted a new bench trial and released Russ on bond. Schwartz presented evidence against Pam, revealing she told police she saw Russ with another man. CSI agent Amy Buhner believed Russ's blood-stained slippers were planted evidence. Russ was acquitted in 2015 and later sued ASI and deputies for ignoring exonerating evidence and fabricating their own. Russ was surprised by the speedy exoneration. Russ won a $2 million settlement in 2020. ASI faced a bar complaint from Joel Schwartz, but it was rejected in 2016. In 2017, ASI cooperated with the U.S. Attorney's review of Betsy Faria's case and asked for an independent probe into her conduct, but was cleared of any wrongdoing. Judge Christina Menem was suspended in 2017 for misconduct. She and ASI were later voted out for mishandling the Betsy Faria murder case. In 2019, Lincoln County appointed Mike Wood as the new attorney, who reopened the case, inspired by Russ Ferris's wrong conviction. After Pam Hupp's Alford plea, Wood requested a review by the major case squad. The case also motivated Rick Harold to run for Lincoln County Sheriff in 2020. Pam Hupp was questioned as a suspect in Betsy Faria's murder in July 2021. She was charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. The prosecutor sought the death penalty due to the brutal nature of the crime, which included 55 stab wounds and a severely cut wrist. Evidence against Pam included a $150,000 life insurance policy. which she claimed for herself despite promising to put it in a trust fund for Betsy's daughter. Pam Hupp claimed she and Betsy were lovers in 2021 and that Betsy wanted more than friendship. She betrayed Betsy, saying Betsy had a crush on her. Prosecutor Mike Wood thought Pam murdered Betsy, stabbing her 55 times with a kitchen knife while she slept. Pam then used her socks to spread footprints, trying to appear as domestic violence. Pam Hupp's case file linked her to Betsy Faria's murder. Despite claiming to be home by 7:20 p.m., Pam's call records showed she was still at Betsy's. Betsy's body position suggested she was killed by someone she trusted. Pam pleaded not guilty in 2022, but her trial was delayed due to her attorney's death. It's now set to begin in 2025 and last about a month. Prosecutor Mike Wood thought the case against Pam Hupp was mishandled from the start, with bias against Russ Faria in his second trial. A 2015 destruction order could have erased key evidence, luckily overlooked, ensuring Faria's release. The case of Michael Haight. Michael Haight was born on January 7, 1980 in Seattle, Washington, but his family moved to Cedar City, Utah, when he was young, after his father finished dental school. Growing up, Michael was an active boy who enjoyed playing baseball, basketball, and soccer. He achieved the rank of Eagle Scout and performed well academically. After graduating from high school in 1998, Michael worked at a fish plant in Alaska during the summer, where he quickly rose to the position of line manager, overseeing more than a dozen men due to his strong work ethic and dedication. Michael then served a mission trip to South Brazil as a devoted member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which further deepened his faith and strengthened his bond with his religious community. Upon returning to the United States, Michael pursued a business degree at Southern Utah University, graduating in 2004. During his time at the university, he met his future wife, Tasha Earle, and they fell in love, getting married in the St. George Temple on May 10, 2003. Michael seemed like the perfect family man to those who didn't know him. He was always involved in his kids' lives, coaching their sports teams, attending school concerts, and spending quality time with them, whether it was sledding or working on projects in the garage. But on January 4th, 2023, the illusion he created around his family life shattered. That day, police found 8 dead bodies at the Haight residence, leaving investigators and neighbors stunned and confused. When Tasha Haight missed an online appointment and her husband Michael failed to show up for work, their colleagues became worried and alerted the police to check on the family's welfare at their home in Enoch. The officers arrived at the Haight residence, but no one answered the door. As they walked around the property, it looked like nobody was home. Knowing the family had 5 kids, the police contacted the Iron County School District to see if any of the children were in school that day, but it turned out none of the kids were present when the police arrived at the Haight home. The officers searched the premises to make sure there was no immediate danger, and after a thorough search, confirmed that nobody needed medical attention, and there were no signs of an active threat. The detectives arrived at the crime scene shortly after it was declared. Upon entering the main bedroom, they saw 4-year-old Gavin lying on his stomach with his head turned to the left, one arm under his head on a pillow, and a blanket covering part of his body. His sister Tasha was similarly positioned with only part of her body covered by the blanket. On the other side of the bed, they found Gail Earle, Tasha's mother, lying on her back with her head on a pillow and partially covered by a blanket, just like her daughter and grandson. In Bry's room, the detectives found the 12-year-old girl lying in bed, slightly inclined and partially covered with a blanket. In Amon's room, they discovered the 7-year-old boy lying face down in the corner of the room, without a pillow or blanket. His twin sister Sienna was found in her bedroom, lying on her left side in bed with her head resting on a pillow and covered with a blanket. The eldest child, 17-year-old Macy, was found in her bed, her head resting on a pillow and her body covered by the blanket. The detectives discovered Michael Haight's body in the exercise room in the basement of his home, lying on top of a sleeping bag. All 8 victims, including his wife, mother-in-law, and 5 children, were found dead with gunshot wounds. Given the circumstances, it didn't take long for the detectives to identify Michael Haight as the primary suspect. They believed he had killed his family members before taking his own life. A neighbor's testimony played a crucial role in helping the detectives reconstruct the timeline of the crime. The neighbor recalled waking up at 3:30 a.m. to use the bathroom and hearing a loud bang, similar to fireworks, as she exited her room. However, she felt annoyed because it was past the permitted date for fireworks in the neighborhood. She then heard 2 more bangs in quick succession, followed by a short pause. This pattern continued, with brief pauses before each subsequent bang, except for a longer pause before the final one. Based on the neighbor's statement and the condition of the 8 bodies found inside the house, detectives theorized that the loud noises she had heard around 3:30 a.m. were directly connected to the events of that night. They suspected that Michael Hatch committed the brutal murders during this specific time frame. During the investigation into the Hatch family murders, detectives discovered that an unnamed person outside the family had reported abuse to the Utah Division of Child and Family Services in 2020. This individual claimed that 14-year-old Macy confided in them about her fear of her father, sparking a deeper investigation into the Hatch household. After receiving the DCFS report, Macy and her parents were questioned separately. During Macy's interview, the investigator uncovered disturbing information. Macy revealed that her father had choked her on multiple occasions, and she feared he would kill her. She disclosed that the violent attacks began in 2017, including an incident where her father grabbed her by the shoulders and pushed her into a wooden piece of furniture. When detectives questioned Michael Hatch, he claimed he had never physically harmed his daughter. He downplayed the incidents Macy described, saying they were simply misunderstandings. Michael attributed his emotional turmoil to 2 recent events: the death of his father and his brother's divorce. He stated that, in his distress, he took out his frustration on his older daughter, Tasha. Tasha chose not to pursue criminal charges against Michael. Similarly, the Utah Department of Children and Family Services, the Enoch Police Department, and the Iron County Prosecutor's Office decided not to press charges, deeming the case insufficient to meet the prosecution requirements set by the statute. A lethality assessment was conducted with Tasha, which revealed that her relationship with Michael did not pose a significant threat to her life. Nevertheless, victim services were made available to Tasha and her children for several months following the case's opening. Through conversations with Tasha's friends, detectives formed a different impression of Michael Hatch than the one he presented to the community. Tasha's friends revealed that whenever they visited, they would often chat with her, while the kitchen water was running to mask their conversation, as Tasha suspected Michael was spying on her discussions. They also helped Tasha with housework during their visits, so Michael wouldn't have anything to criticize her about. Tasha's friends disclosed that whenever she texted them, she would respond with brief, upbeat messages, likely aware that Michael might read them. They believed she did this to maintain a positive facade for Michael's benefit, implying that everything was fine in their marriage. Detectives found Michael displayed controlling behavior towards his wife, Tasha. He took away her car keys and phone to keep her from leaving. They also suspected him after he overreacted to her buying a $30 rug from Walmart, accusing her of excessive spending despite the legitimate need. Tasha shared with her friends her concerns that her 7-year-old son, Amon, was increasingly mimicking his father Michael's bad behavior. Whenever she gave Amon an instruction, he would respond by saying that it was not his job. This worried Tasha because it revealed Amon's growing lack of responsibility and disregard for authority. She mentioned that Michael frequently disregarded or ignored her instructions, and Amon seemed to be following his example. In 2022, Tasha prioritized self-care by getting her nails done despite her busy schedule. However, her husband Michael wasn't supportive, imposing strict rules on her independence. After her appointment, Tasha felt confident and told Michael she'd make it a monthly routine, sparking his anger over the potential cost. To address Michael's concerns, Tasha explained calmly that her monthly self-care expenses came out to $25. Despite this, Michael remained skeptical, claiming that by spending money on her nails, Tasha was essentially taking away from their children's basic needs. This stance stemmed from his need for control and sense of financial responsibility towards their family. At the same time, Tasha began to prioritize her self-care and eventually started losing weight, a significant change after years of her husband calling her fat and ugly. Michael became angry about her weight loss, accusing Tasha of cheating on him as he struggled to explain the sudden change in her appearance. As Michael's controlling behavior escalated, he tried to manipulate Tasha regarding her weight loss. He begged her to stop, fearing that other men might find her attractive. Underlying this request were his deep-seated insecurities and desire for complete control over his wife's body and actions. Michael exhibited a frugal attitude during the holiday season, despite earning a significant income. He allocated only $100 for each of their 5 children to buy gifts, whereas Tasha made sure they had a fulfilling Christmas. However, Michael refused to provide additional funds for his wife and children, justifying his stance by claiming that he didn't see the need to give them more of what he believed was rightfully his. Michael controlled every aspect of Tasha's life, including her cleaning and childcare habits. He insisted on using baby wipes, claiming they were eco-friendly and cost-effective, but this caused Tasha stress and compromised her comfort and hygiene. If she didn't comply, Michael threatened trouble, leaving her fearful and submissive. According to Tasha's friends, she revealed to them that Michael was mean to her throughout their marriage, but he didn't mistreat their children until the late 2010s. However, as time passed, the abuse towards Macy worsened, causing her to contemplate suicide. Michael had unrealistically high expectations for Macy, demanding she maintain straight A's despite her struggles. The pressure to meet his expectations became overwhelming for Macy, who was already dealing with the emotional weight of her father's abuse. Macy's friends shared another disturbing incident with the detective. One evening, Michael came home and found Macy resting her head on her mother's lap. He became enraged and ordered Macy to get up and clean her room. This event left Macy deeply shaken, as she remembered gazing into her father's eyes and seeing hatred and evil staring back. Detectives found another instance where 7-year-old Briley disobeyed Michael's warnings. Michael blamed his wife Tasha for their kids' misbehavior, calling them the worst in the world. He berated Tasha in front of their kids, even calling her fat and ugly. Tasha realized she needed to escape her 20-year marriage to Michael after a distressing incident exposed his abusive nature and temper. Seeing the harm it was causing their kids, she knew she had to leave. Tasha decided to divorce Michael after over 20 years, prioritizing their children's well-being over their marriage. On Dec 21, 2022, she initiated proceedings, but asked to delay serving papers until after the holiday season, wanting one last normal Christmas for their 5 kids before the separation. Michael got divorce papers at his office on Dec 27. He called Tasha, acting normal, asking about her day, like nothing was wrong. He told her to leave the house, but wanted the kids to stay. Tasha refused, insisting on taking the kids with her. Tasha took the children to her mother's house in Lynn, Utah. That evening, Michael arrived at his mother-in-law's house and tried to persuade Tasha to go for a ride with him. But Tasha declined, telling her friends she had a bad feeling about going anywhere alone with Michael. After Tasha filed for divorce, her mom Gail moved in to help. However, Michael made things worse by moving into the basement fitness room instead of leaving the house. Tasha told her friends she had found a discrepancy in their children's savings accounts, which held $220,000. What she discovered shocked her. Michael had transferred the money out of the accounts without her knowledge or permission. After her father's death, Tasha inherited several firearms, including hunting rifles and a handgun. When she checked her house in January 2023, she realized all the guns were gone. Further investigation revealed Michael had taken the weapons, leaving Tasha and her family defenseless in case of an emergency. Macy, Michael and Tasha's eldest child, confided in her friends that she would welcome her parents' divorce. She longed for the peace that would come with her father's absence from the home. Macy even kept a secret phone in her room, which she used to record her father's erratic behavior, hoping to gather evidence to support the divorce. However, Tasha found the phone and hid it away. Macy's younger sister, Briley, had a troubled home life due to the constant drama. To escape this, Briley would often visit her neighbor's house, where she found comfort with their grandchildren. Briley confided in a friend that she was relieved about her parents' upcoming divorce. She had even bought some new books, but was too afraid to tell her father, fearing he would become angry. Tasha met her lawyer on January 3, 2023, to discuss her divorce from abusive husband Michael. She felt relieved he'd moved to the basement due to his volatile behavior. Asked if she'd ever feared for her or her children's safety, Tasha said she never had. In hindsight, Tasha's optimism was tragically misplaced. The police investigation was harrowing, piecing together a chilling sequence of events. A disturbing Google search on December 30th stood out, revealing Michael's firearms queries just days before the deadly shooting, painting a chilling picture of his intentions. The search results revealed alarming questions, such as inquiries about how loud a 9mm gunshot is, what a gunshot sounds like, what to do if gunshots are heard near one's house, if a single gunshot in the neighborhood at night would be immediately recognized, and if one would be brave enough to call the police, how loud a gunshot in the house would be, and if a neighbor would hear a gunshot in the garage, and how loud a 40mm pistol is. Michael's suicide note said he'd rather rot in hell than endure his wife's controlling behavior. He felt desperate, frustrated, and trapped, repeatedly asking for help that never came. Determined to end the manipulation, he refused to be a burden to society. The case's details have shocked many, revealing a deeply dysfunctional family plagued by violence. Michael's actions were premeditated, carefully planned to catch his family off guard. The case of Valeria Vivano. Valeria Fernandez Vivano was born on May 29, 1996, in Laguna, a small commune near Santiago, Chile's capital city. She was the youngest of 3 children born to Miguel and Jacqueline Vivano. Valeria grew up with her older biological siblings, Michelangelo and Daniela. Her father worked for a transportation company, while her mother was a dedicated homemaker who focused on raising their children and creating a warm home environment. When Valeria started school, her parents decided to separate, which was a huge shock to her. Although they continued to communicate after the divorce, and her father remained involved in their lives, providing financial support, Valeria harbored resentment towards him. They would occasionally argue, sometimes not speaking for months, but they always reconciled. After the divorce, Miguel Vivano remarried and had 2 more children, becoming Valeria's half-siblings. Despite this, Valeria, Daniela, and Michelangelo maintained warm relationships with them. Jacqueline, on the other hand, never remarried, focusing on raising her children and later caring for her grandchildren from her older children. Valeria showed a strong-willed character, determination, and perseverance from a young age. She excelled academically, participated in sports, and demonstrated courage and a strong sense of justice, often putting others' needs before her own. Valeria's desire to help those around her, protect the vulnerable, and fight for justice likely inspired her to pursue a career in law enforcement. After graduating from high school, Valeria enrolled in the police academy in Santiago, where she graduated with honors in 2016 at the age of 20. The following year, she joined the Chilean police force and began working in the capital's serious crimes unit. From the start of her career, Valeria demonstrated herself to be a dedicated and passionate law enforcement officer, driven by a strong sense of justice. She was deeply committed to her job, performing her duties with diligence and always ready to respond to any situation at a moment's notice. Whether it meant leaving in the middle of the night to investigate a crime scene, pursuing suspects at personal risk, or providing emotional support to those who had lost loved ones, Valeria was always willing to go the extra mile. Her colleagues praised her as kind, cheerful, and friendly, yet she remained a consummate professional and trustworthy partner. Over nearly 5.5 years of service, Valeria received numerous accolades and awards, rapidly advancing in her career and earning the respect of her peers and the admiration of her superiors. A highlight of her career was representing her department in Spain, where she spent 2 weeks in Madrid on an official visit, an experience that filled her with immense pride. By 2020, she had risen to the rank of assistant inspector. A 21-year-old rookie cop, Lionel Alejandro Contreras Canales, joined the precinct where Valeria worked, fresh from the police academy. Valeria took him under her wing, becoming his mentor in his first job. A few months into their partnership, they got along fairly well. Not much is known about Lionel's upbringing, but it's believed he came from a wealthy and influential family with a high-ranking official as an uncle, which gave him a life of comfort and luxury. As a result, Lionel was self-absorbed, expecting everything to go his way. Valeria soon caught Lionel's attention, and he made several attempts to win her over, asking her out on dates, but she rejected him each time. Valeria was dedicated to her job and saw workplace romances as unprofessional. She was also strict with Lionel, viewing him as immature. Although Lionel was only 3 years younger, Valeria found his behavior childish and hoped to help him grow up. On May 29, 2021, Valeria turned 25. She celebrated her birthday at her mother's house, surrounded by many guests, including relatives, friends, and work colleagues. However, Lionel was not invited. Valeria intentionally left him out to avoid any potential awkwardness, as he had recently tried to rekindle their romance. When she talked to him about it, he only reaffirmed his feelings for her, which she wanted to keep private from their colleagues. Valeria looked upset despite the festivities. She was trying to conceal her sadness with a fake smile. The recent quarrel with her father had caused days of silence between them, and she had hoped he would put their differences aside and come to her party, giving them a chance to make up. But all he did was send a congratulatory message without even bothering to phone her. Jacqueline, Valeria's mother, noticed her daughter's distress and knew that the rift with her father was the cause of her sadness. Angry at her ex-husband's actions, she was convinced that Miguel would eventually reach out to Valeria and they would talk things through and reconcile. Tragically, Valeria and her father never got the chance to resolve their issues. 2 weeks later, she lost her life in a fatal shooting while on duty on June 13, 2021. Valeria was participating in street patrols and vehicle checks that night, searching for suspects related to a crime that had occurred the previous day in a suburb of the capital. The police had issued an alert for a white Kia Chato, believed to be driven by a suspected criminal, who was likely armed and possibly accompanied by others in the car. Valeria was riding in a patrol car with her partner Lionel, driven by Deputy Commissioner Felipe Gilardo. They spotted the suspect's vehicle and immediately gave chase, without waiting for backup. The officers successfully intercepted and blocked the suspect's escape. Canales and Vivano jumped out of their vehicle, guns drawn, and yelled for the offenders to surrender and exit their car with their hands raised. Just then, a single shot rang out, and in the ensuing chaos, Valeria clutched her side and fell to the asphalt beside the police car. Reinforcements arrived simultaneously, and her colleagues heard the shot and saw that she was wounded, but they couldn't fully comprehend what had happened or who had fired. The criminals took advantage of the momentary confusion, sped away, and escaped the scene. Despite the swift arrival of medics and her colleagues' efforts to stop the bleeding, Valeria's life couldn't be saved. She was rushed to the nearest hospital, where top specialists fought to save her life for several hours. Unfortunately, due to severe blood loss and damage to vital organs, Valeria passed away on the operating table, never regaining consciousness. Valeria's family rushed to the hospital after hearing the news, but they were too late. Miguel, her dad, was overwhelmed with grief and regret, haunted by their recent petty argument. His guilt was so intense, it put his own health at risk. Valeria died in the line of duty during an operation to catch dangerous criminals, hailed as a hero for giving her life to ensure others' peace and safety. Local media extensively covered the story, praising her courage and selflessness. The public was shocked and captivated by the arrests, and soon the suspects were identified as 19-year-old Miguel Alejandro Cupin and his 17-year-old accomplice, whose name was not released due to his age. Both had previous convictions for minor crimes. In response to the arrests, Chile's president, Miguel Juan Sebastián Pinera, issued an official statement promising that those responsible would face the full extent of the law. As the investigation progressed, some facts didn't add up. Valeria's body was returned to her family after the autopsy and buried in a capital city cemetery, with hundreds attending the funeral. Her parents described the experience as a terrible nightmare. Notably, among those who carried Valeria's coffin was her colleague Lionel, who seemed more grief-stricken than anyone else. However, other colleagues reported that there had been recent tension between Valeria and Lionel, to the extent that Valeria didn't even invite him to her birthday celebration. Legal proceedings started right after the funeral against those arrested the next day. Initially, everyone thought the guilty ones were caught and proving it would be easy. But it soon became clear the investigation was flawed, with key details missed and evidence ignored. A month and a half after the officer's death, 2 employees were suspended for their alleged role in the incident. Valeria's parents were called to the prosecutor's office, expecting new evidence. Instead, they were devastated to learn from prosecutor Juan Carlos Carrasco that their daughter died from a bullet fired by her colleague. Subsequent investigations showed that the fatal shot was fired from a service weapon held by one of Valeria's co-workers. A same-day ballistics test confirmed this, but the results were tampered with, and the bullet's characteristics, shape, caliber, and weight were incorrectly recorded in the evidence locker. Furthermore, the bullet had passed through Valeria's body, but it wasn't extracted. Instead, it was reported to have been extracted, and the entry and exit wounds in the forensic reports were switched. The shot was fired into her back, not her abdomen. Furthermore, the detainees who were on trial, claiming to have confessed to their involvement and were on the verge of imprisonment, began filing complaints. They alleged that their confessions were obtained through torture and threats, and the pistol they had with them that evening was not even loaded. Moreover, their involvement in the prior crime that prompted the interception plan that fateful night remained unconfirmed. A surprising twist emerged in the public's perception of Vivano, transforming her from a tragic hero who died in the line of duty to an innocent victim betrayed by her own colleagues. As a result, the main suspect shifted to Felipe Gilardo Ara, who was driving the police car, and Lionel Alejandro Contas Canales, Vivano's partner, who was seated in the back. Both were immediately suspended from duty. On August 5th, it was discovered that the fatal bullet came from a police-issued weapon. A document surfaced showing examination results that implicated Lionel as the prime suspect, as he was the only one with gunshot residue on his hands, a crucial finding that had been mysteriously left out of previous reports. Additionally, several other vital documents, including ballistics examination reports and the pathologist's conclusions, were improperly stored in an archive box that had not been thoroughly reviewed. It remains unclear whether this was an accident, an oversight, or a deliberate attempt to conceal crucial evidence. The police officers involved in the operation to catch the criminals surprisingly became suspects in the murder of their fellow officer. Along with the suspects already arrested, They participated in a reenactment of the events of that night to clarify what had happened. In the reenactment, Philippe, who was driving, explained that he could only see Valeria, who was sitting next to him in the front passenger seat, when she got out of the car. Lionel, who was sitting behind them, also exited the vehicle, but Philippe couldn't see what he was doing. According to Philippe, Valeria took just a few steps before a shot was fired, causing her to fall to the ground. At that point, Lionel rushed to help the injured woman and provide first aid to try to save her life. Lionel gave a different account of what happened, saying that he and his partner Valeria got out of the patrol car at almost the same time, but she rushed forward immediately after the shot was fired. He denied shooting his colleague, Valeria, and claimed that Philippe, the driver, should have seen him trying to help Valeria and confirmed this. According to Lionel, he was the first to assist Valeria and tried to stop her bleeding to prevent her from dying. The investigation managed to reconstruct the events, despite inconsistencies in the witnesses' statements. They found that Canales was behind his partner when the shot was fired, which corresponded with the bullet's trajectory. Furthermore, he was the only one with traces of gunshot residue on his hands. Lionel was arrested as prime suspect after secret reports and test results were released, while other detainees were freed on condition they stay local, lacking evidence to implicate them. But the officers' motives remained unclear. The prevailing theory is that a tragic accident occurred when an inexperienced young officer unintentionally fired his weapon while standing behind his partner. In a state of panic, he attempted to assist her. Later, when submitting his service weapon, he falsely claimed not to have fired it. However, the truth eventually came to light, exposing that influential relatives of the young officer exploited their power, wealth, and connections to conceal the incident, leading to fabricated reports, missing documents, contradictory evidence, and coerced testimony from detained individuals. Despite Canales' arrest, suspicions about Philippe's involvement persisted. Philippe was also armed with the same service weapons, was present at the scene, and could have accidentally fired the fatal shot. Additionally, Philippe had a history of using his weapon unjustifiably during an arrest, although no one was harmed on that occasion. The defense team, hired by Lionel's relatives, presented a theory that Philippe might have accidentally shot his colleague due to the identical service weapons, which could have been mixed up or intentionally swapped. Philippe's own testimony was inconsistent, and he claimed he couldn't accurately describe the events that took place. Despite this, the lack of gunpowder residue on the driver's hands suggested his innocence. Philippe's explanation that the residue came from when he was compressing the victim's wound was not believable, given that Valeria's blood stains remained on his hands. The investigation was widely criticized, and the victim's parents were left feeling desperate, leading to public outrage and a loss of trust in law enforcement. Following further investigation, Lionel remained the sole suspect. Lionel was ultimately found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 12 years in prison. However, in a surprise move, the Supreme Court later overturned the sentence, reducing his imprisonment to just 540 days. Valeria's family is now planning to sue the Chilean state, accusing the judges of corruption. The case of the Harvey family. Brian Taba Harvey, 49, was a local icon who rose to fame in the 1980s as the lead singer and songwriter of the indie band House of Freaks. Although he and his musical partner Johnny Hott went their separate ways professionally in the 1990s, they remained close friends. A dedicated musician, Brian performed on stage for the final time on New Year's Eve, unaware that it would be the last night of his life. On the other hand, Catherine Gravinsky, 39, found success as co-owner of World of Mirth, a popular toy store in Richmond's Carytown district. She was an artist who pursued various endeavors, including painting sets for community theater, working as a pastry chef, and waitressing. Catherine had an older sister, Shelley Gravinsky, and was also the half-sister of actor Stephen Culp, known for his roles in TV shows such as The West Wing and Desperate Housewives, as well as various films. Brian and Catherine's paths crossed at the Border Cafe on Main Street, where Catherine worked and Brian frequently visited with Johnny. In 1990, Brian and Catherine got married. The House of Freaks then released an album featuring a song called I Got Happy, which was dedicated to Catherine. The couple had 2 daughters. Their first daughter, Stella, was born in 1996. After becoming a father, Brian realized that having children helped him find meaning in life and the importance of keeping hope for his children's future. Their second daughter, Ruby, was born in 2001. While working in the computer department of the Henrico County School System, Brian continued to pursue his passion for music. Meanwhile, Catherine started her own business, opening a unique toy and gift store called World of Mirth in the Carytown neighborhood. The store was designed to be a welcoming space for parents and children to spend time together, and children are free to play with the available toys. Brian Harvey's family lives in a quiet, quaint neighborhood south of Richmond. Their 2-story red brick house was surrounded by large trees, porch swings, and ivy-covered gardens. They had a cozy family room in the basement. The family was well respected and loved in the community, and it seemed no one had any ill will towards them. On New Year's Day, 2006, Brian, his wife Catherine, and their 2 daughters, Stella and Ruby, were preparing for a busy day. They were hosting a barbecue lunch for friends and family, a tradition they enjoyed every year on this day. They woke up early to get everything ready. That Sunday morning, Brian went outside to collect the newspaper, absorbed in the front page news. He didn't lock the door when he came back in, which wasn't unusual for them, especially on party days when friends would be arriving. The neighborhood was considered safe, so they didn't think much of it. However, on that day, Brian was unaware that some criminals were secretly lurking nearby. Catherine was busy in the kitchen, preparing cookies for the guests who were expected to arrive soon. Suddenly, she heard voices coming from the living room and thought that some guests had arrived early. But when she went to check, she was shocked to see 2 strangers instead of familiar faces. Later, Brian, Catherine, and their young daughter Ruby were ordered to go downstairs to the basement playroom. Stella, who had spent the night at a friend's house, had not yet arrived home. Once the family was in the small room, the intruders used electrical cords and packing tape to tie them up. The intruders told them that as long as they cooperated, no one would get hurt while they searched the house. Just as the intruders were starting to ransack the house, someone knocked on the front door at around 10 a.m. The leader of the intruders untied Catherine and told her to answer the door. However, he warned her that if she tried to escape or ask for help, her daughter and husband would be killed. Catherine was in a difficult situation. Stella was about to arrive, and if she answered the door, she would put her daughter in danger. On the other hand, if she didn't answer the door, the intruder might get angry and hurt her family. In the end, Catherine decided that it was best to cooperate, so she opened the door. Stella suddenly ran past Catherine and into the playroom, where the family usually spent a lot of time together. Catherine quickly intervened, stopping Stella's friend from following her. Kyron Perkinson, the friend's mother, later expressed her surprise at Catherine's unusual behavior. When Perkinson asked Catherine how she was feeling, Catherine said she was not well. Then, she made a circular motion with her hand, mimicking a gun and pointing it at her head. This abruptly ended the conversation, and Catherine shut the door. This strange gesture would later trouble Perkinson, wondered if Catherine was trying to convey something. She wondered if Catherine being monitored by the intruders. Perkinson left, intending to return later for a party. All 4 members of the Harvey family were now inside the house. Catherine went back to the basement and found Stella had been securely tied up alongside the rest of the family. Everyone was caught helpless and defenseless. Chaos broke out unexpectedly and without any prior indication. The assailant revealed a knife taken from the Harveys' kitchen and began slashing the family members' throats. Angry that he had to wait so long for them to die, he ordered his accomplices to hit them hard on the head. However, the accomplice refused. The assailant then grabbed a claw hammer and ruthlessly struck the family members repeatedly until they stopped moving. After removing Catherine Harvey's wedding ring, the assailants set the room on fire using wine as an accelerant to conceal evidence of their crimes. As they escaped from the scene, they ate a plate of freshly baked cookies from the kitchen counter and stole a laptop, DVD player, and other items. They rushed out and entered the getaway vehicle parked outside, where a woman was waiting. She was related to one of the robbers and had been on lookout duty during the incident. They quickly departed, leaving the scene as quietly as they had arrived. Later that day, around 1:30 p.m., Johnny arrived at the celebratory gathering. Upon opening the front door, he was met with a thick cloud of smoke and a strong burning smell. Alarmed, he alerted the neighbors. They quickly called 911. Firefighters arrived at the scene and put out the fire. However, they soon discovered 4 bodies in the smoldering basement. Despite initial appearances, investigators determined that the fire did not cause the deaths. Instead, they found evidence of a more sinister cause. The investigation was now treating the incident as a murder case. The scene was so heartbreaking that it left even the police and medical staff, who were accustomed to dealing with traumatic situations, utterly stunned and shocked. Some were even seen crying openly. The discovery that parents were made to watch their children being brutally killed, and that children were also forced to witness the brutal deaths of their parents, was especially devastating. Autopsies revealed that Brian and Catherine died from blunt force trauma to the head. Stella's death was caused by a combination of blunt force trauma and smoke inhalation, suggesting she was still alive when the fire started. Ruby's cause of death was stab wounds to the neck and back, resulting in her death. The authorities immediately launched an investigation into the murders, but they had little evidence to work with. To gather more information, they appealed to the public for assistance. This approach proved successful when, on January 6th, a woman named Latoya P.Y. contacted the police, requesting a welfare check on her friend, 21 years old Ashley Basil Tucker. Latoya expressed concerns that Ashley's boyfriend, 29 years old Reed Joseph Dandridge, and his uncle, 29 years old Ricky Javon Gray, were involved in the Harvey family's murder. Gray, who was slightly younger than his nephew by a few months, was reportedly the one in charge. The investigation took a significant turn when Latoya revealed that the 2 men had hidden evidence of their crimes at her residence. She disclosed that Gray and Dandridge had recently visited her home with a laptop that had an image of the Harvey family as its wallpaper. Given the extensive news coverage of the Harvey case, it was clear that the laptop belonged to the family. Latoya revealed information about the plan that Ashley, Gray, and Dandridge had devised to rob Ashley's parents. According to the plan, Ashley would pretend to be a hostage, allowing Dandridge and Gray to extort money from the Persile Tucker, Ashley's stepfather. This would make Ashley appear innocent, even though Latoya knew about the plan and was offered a role in it. However, Latoya became suspicious of the group and declined to participate. Later, when Latoya asked Gray and Dandridge about Ashley's whereabouts, they gave a cryptic response, saying, "Ashley has gone bye-bye." This increased Latoya's concerns, and she contacted the police. The information she provided was crucial in helping investigators connect the dots. When investigators arrived at the residence where Ashley lived with her mother, Mary Baskerville Tucker, and stepfather, Persile Tucker, they found a gruesome scene. Inside the home, they discovered the lifeless bodies of all 3 victims, who had been subjected to a brutal and violent death, similar to the Harvey family. The victims were bound, gagged, and had their throats slit. Duct tape was wrapped tightly around their heads, causing additional suffering. Mary and Persile had deep neck lacerations, and Persile had a sock inserted into his throat. Ashley was found to have been suffocated with a plastic bag. The cause of death for all three victims was determined to be suffocation and torture. The police believed that the killer's primary motivation was a thrill-seeking desire, rather than any obvious personal benefit, so they worked together to catch them before they could hurt anyone else. Similar to the Harveys, Persile and Mary live a quiet life with no known enemies. Percy works as a forklift driver, while Mary works for a cleaning service company. Their peaceful life was shattered by their daughter's betrayal, leading to the tragic death of a couple enjoying their golden years. Investigators quickly discovered a crucial connection between the Harvey family's case and the Tucker family's case. Ashley was found wearing Catherine's wedding band, which had been missing and taken from Catherine. With this revelation, urgent action was necessary to apprehend Gray and Dandridge before they could inflict further harm. Authorities tracked Gray and Dandridge back to their home state of Pennsylvania and apprehended them in Philadelphia on January 7th. Dandridge claimed that Gray planned the murders and he just followed orders. When faced with these accusations, Gray provided explicit and disturbing details of the two family massacres, explaining that financial gain was the primary motivation behind their actions. Notably, during the Harvey family murders, he was under the influence of an illicit substance called PCP, also known as phencyclidine or angel dust. This potent drug is known to cause auditory and visual hallucinations and often leads to aggressive behavior. During his confession, Gray showed no emotion, maintaining a chilling stare. His indifference to the lives he took led investigators to view him as a ruthless and heartless individual. Additionally, it was discovered that Gray was responsible for the murder of his wife, Trevor Terrell Gray, whose body was found in a shallow grave in Washington, Pennsylvania. The couple, married for 6 months, lived together in a house owned by Trevor's family. They shared the home with Gray's nephew, Dandridge. Trevor's parents reported that the couple frequently had intense arguments. On the day Trevor's body was discovered, Gray had claw marks on his forearm. Initially, neither Gray nor Dandridge were considered suspects by the Washington police. Trevor's mother, Manna Squires, claimed that the police thought Trevor's death was due to a drug overdose, which led to a slow investigation. Trevor's death initially raised suspicions, but a thorough investigation did not occur until Gray confessed to the crime in 2006. On December 31, 2005, a violent assault occurred outside a home in Arlington. Two men, later identified as Gray and Dandridge, attacked 26-year-old Ryan Key in front of his parents' house. The assault left Ryan with severe injuries, including stab wounds to the chest, neck, and arms. He spent 2 weeks in a coma due to the near-fatal attack. Additionally, he permanently lost the use of his right arm. Gray and Dandridge faced multiple charges related of the Tucker's family killings. Gray was charged with 5 counts of capital murder, while Dandridge faced 3 counts of murder. Despite initially admitting to their involvement, both men pleaded not guilty. Gray's 6-month trial concluded with a guilty verdict on all counts. He received a life sentence for the murders of Brian and Catherine Harvey. The court also sentenced him to death for the brutal murders of Stella and Ruby. Following Gray's conviction in September 2006, Dandridge chose to accept a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in December 2006. Gray also faced charges in Culpeper County for the murder of Cheryl Warner, a 37-year-old mother of 3 who was found shot and hanged in her burning home. Gray pleaded not guilty, but the charge was later suspended due to conflicting evidence on June 4, 2008. Over the next 9 years, Gray's lawyers filed multiple appeals. They argued that Gray's traumatic childhood had affected his mental capacity. However, the Supreme Court rejected his case in 2016. As a result, Gray was scheduled to be executed on January 18, 2017. On the scheduled date, with all appeals exhausted, Gray was put to death by lethal injection at Greensville Correctional Center. Meanwhile, Dandridge remains in prison at Sussex 2 State Prison. The Harvey family's brutal murders sent shockwaves of horror and grief through the community. Over 1,400 people attended their memorial service, expressing condolences and sorrow outside Catherine's store. Flowers, dolls, and candles formed a poignant tribute along the curb outside the red brick house. The candles, lit by children, remained glowing for weeks. Catherine's brother Culp described the murders as a devastating blow that felt endless. He spoke about the pain of thinking about the family's final hours, saying that everyone was trying to move forward. The case of Jared Brydgone. Jared Brydgone was born in 1989 in Florida to a modest family. He was the second of 2 sons, and he was very close to his older brother, Adam. His family was heavily involved with the Church of Jesus Christ of Saints. As Jared entered his teenage years, he met a girl named Mallory Bowden through the church. The two began a date relationship, with she considering Jared her first true love. However, their religious community discouraged living together before marriage, which caused Jared and Mallory to eventually separate. This occurred after Jared graduated from a high school in Florida in 2007. Then, he decided to pursue further education in another state. Jared moved to Utah for college, where he would meet his future first wife at a friend's birthday party. In 2009, Jared, then 20 years old, met Shauna Gardner, 22 years old, from a wealthy family. Shauna was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She was born in 1987 to parents Sterling and Shelley Gardner, who co-founded Stampin' Up!, a major company that produces and sells craft items. By 2010, the family business, based in Salt Lake City, generated an annual revenue of $100 million. She has a sister named Sarah, who holds a managerial position in the family business. Growing up in a wealthy family, Shauna enjoyed luxury and a life of leisure. She didn't work as a chef, despite being trained in that profession. People described her as enthusiastic but also a bit indecisive. Initially, Jared wasn't overly interested in her. However, Shauna made an effort to draw him in with her lavish lifestyle, suggesting they could travel the world and do as they pleased, thanks to her parents' financial support. The couple's relationship moved quickly. Just a few months after meeting, they got engaged. By early 2010, they had married in a lavish temple ceremony in Salt Lake City, Utah, the Shauna family covering all expenses. Their decision to marry quickly was influenced by their strong religious beliefs. After getting married, Shauna and Jared moved to Utah, where they bought a comfortable home, valued at around $1 million, with the help of the bride's parents. Each of them owned a Mercedes, despite Jared still being in school and Shauna not having a job. They took many luxurious trips around the world and often posted about their adventures, expensive buys, and hobbies on social media. Friends close to they said that Shauna's parents gave them about $10,000 each month for expenses and also let them use their accounts freely. Jared received a generous gift of $100,000 from his in-laws after completing his degree, which he used to start his own business. The following year, 2013, they welcomed a set of twins, a daughter named Abigail and a son named Liam. Initially, the family resided in Connecticut, but they soon relocated after Liam was diagnosed with a heart condition and lung issues. The move was recommended by doctors, who advised that a coastal location would be beneficial for Liam's health. The Jared family consequently settled in Florida, purchasing a comfortable 2-story home near the coastline in Ponte Vedra Beach, south of Jacksonville. During this time, Shauna managed her social media blog, where she presented herself as a loving wife and caring mother. Jared and Shauna were a couple who took fitness seriously, often visiting the gym together. Noticing his wife's dedication, Jared decided to surprise her by hiring a personal trainer. However, soon after they relocated, the couple faced significant marital issues. Even so, they still choose to save face and pretend that everything is fine. Shauna's feelings about their religion began to shift. She lost interest and nearly stopped attending church services, while Jared still stands his ground. This difference in faith and devotion caused ongoing tension and arguments. Furthermore, Shauna's perception of Jared had also changed. She felt he had become lazy, gained weight, and lacked focus on starting his business. Jared completed online courses in programming and design. He then got a job at Microsoft, which helped him gain financial independence. Over time, he advanced to a senior manager position. However, his relationship with his wife began to deteriorate, and frequent arguments became a common occurrence in their home. The situation worsened when Jared discovered intimate conversations between his wife and her fitness trainer, causing him to suspect they were having an affair with each other. Although his wife denied this, the coach confirmed Jared's suspicions via phone call. Jared then contacted his friend, Meller Bowden, via email, lamenting that his wife had become distant from him and increasingly attached to her fitness trainer. Despite this, he expressed his desire to forgive her and work through their issues for the sake of their children. Unfortunately, their efforts to repair the relationship were unsuccessful. In 2015, after nearly 6 years of marriage, the couple began a contentious divorce, battling over shared assets and child custody. Jared publicly accused Shauna of being unfaithful, which she vehemently denied, claiming instead that the marriage had lost its love. In turn, she accused Jared of being cruel and behaving offensively. A dispute between Shauna and Jared led to disagreements over the division of assets and custody of their twin children. Shauna claimed that most of their possessions, including their home, cars, and bank account funds, were gifts or purchased by her parents. She believed Jared had no claim to these items because he had only recently started working after spending years on his education. Jared countered that he was entitled to at least half of their Florida home, citing his contributions over the years. Shauna and Jared also had intense disputes about the custody of their twins. Shauna accused Jared of manipulating the children against her when he was with them, coaching them on what to say about she and recording their statements to use as evidence in court. In response, Jared accused she of snooping on his private life by installing hidden cameras in their home, tapping his phone calls, and tracking his movements. Shauna sought sole custody of the children and sole ownership of their seaside home. She also accused Jared of attempting to withdraw from the children's trust funds for his own use. He retaliated by accusing of tax evasion and claiming that she received thousands of dollars in income working at the family company without paying taxes. By the end of 2015, the court had awarded Jared and Shauna joint custody of their children, but this decision did not bring an end to their disputes. Despite their divorce being finalized, they continued to engage in lengthy court battles for nearly 7 more years, leading to a tragic outcome. During this time, both Jared and Shauna had new families and having more children. Jared met Christina, a fellow Microsoft employee from North Carolina, in 2016. At first, they were just friends, but eventually developed into a dating relationship. A few months later, Christina relocated to Florida to be with Jared. In the fall of 2017, Jared and Christina got married. In February 2019, they had a daughter named Bexley. They then had a son named London in August 2021. Around the same time, Shauna also married again in 2018 to a man named Mario Fernandez who owned a real estate business. Mario was a year her junior. In 2018, Shauna and Mario had a son named Michael. They later moved into the house where Shauna used to live with her ex-husband, Jared. Jared and Shauna's ongoing conflict continued despite both having started new families. They still filed lawsuits against each other, making new demands. One major point of contention was Jared's insistence that if Shauna was not present, her new husband Mario should not be allowed to be with their twins, Abigail and Liam. Simultaneously, he also seeking greater involvement for his new wife Christina in raising Abigail and Liam. On the other hand, Shauna alleged that Jared was trying to humiliate her by not allowing her to use the larger, safer family vehicle to transport the children. Their last court meeting, which took place 4 months before Jared's death, was exceptionally tense. Both parties leveled new accusations, and their property rights continued to be a point of dispute. Following their divorce, a court ruling granted Shauna exclusive use of the larger vehicle and required Jared to pay her $600 in compensation. Jared would pick up Abigail and Liam every Wednesday to spend time together. They would meet for dinner, with their younger sister Bexley occasionally joining them. On Wednesday, February 22, 2022, Jared followed their routine. He picked up Abigail and Liam, took them to a coastal cafe for dinner, and then they went for a walk. After that, he took his 2 children to Shauna's house and headed home via his usual route, which took about 40 minutes. Part of this route included a deserted and poorly lit stretch of road. As Jared drove slowly in the dark, aware that his 3-year-old daughter, Bexley, was asleep in her car seat, he suddenly spotted a tire in his lane. It was around 9 p.m. Jared stopped the car, turned on his hazard lights, and got out to move the tire to the side of the road. Then several shots rang out. Jared didn't have time to react, because the shooter acted with precision, firing multiple bullets at close range, and later fleeing the scene. Bexley was not injured or harmed in this incident. A passerby witnessed the aftermath of the shooting and cautiously approached Jared's body, which was lying in a pool of blood. The passerby immediately called for police and paramedics, but unfortunately, they arrived too late to save Jared. The investigation began with a suspicious timeline. Just before the incident, Jared had called his wife, Christina, to let her know he was on his way home. However, when Jared didn't arrive after an hour, Christina tried calling him again, this time reaching a police officer who informed her of the incident and asked her to report to the Jacksonville Beach Police Station. The police investigation at the scene revealed that Jared's car had stopped due to a tire on the road. They concluded that Jared had exited his vehicle to remove the obstacle, at which point he was shot. Fortunately, Bexley, who was asleep in the back seat, was unharmed, suggesting that she was not the target of the shooter. The fact that Jared's wallet, phone, and tablet were still in the vehicle, with no valuables missing, led investigators to quickly rule out robbery as a motive. Christina was asked if her husband had any known enemies or recent conflicts. She said she didn't know of anyone who wanted to harm him, except possibly his first wife, Shauna. However, she didn't want to make any direct accusations without solid proof. The police couldn't find any surveillance footage of the incident because there were no cameras in the area where it happened. A witness did hear the shots. Then they did hear a vehicle speeding away, and they couldn't see anything in the dark. Christina suggested that Shauna was involved in the crime, a theory that seemed possible to investigators. However, investigators suspect Shauna had an accomplice, as she had an alibi at the time of the crime. She was at home with Mario, Abigail, and Liam, Michael, and visiting parents at the time of the incident. To gather more evidence, the police reviewed nearby surveillance footage. To further investigate, detectives checked the footage from nearby surveillance cameras. The footage showed a dark blue Ford F-150 with brown trim entering the area about 15 minutes before the incident occurred. The same vehicle was seen again on camera a few minutes after the witness reported hearing shots. Jared's family made public appeals asking anyone with information, no matter how small, about the case to come forward. The police arrested Cheyenne and her current husband, Mario, as their first suspects. Despite multiple questioning sessions, they both denied any involvement in the murder. Cheyenne acknowledged that her relationship with Jared was complicated, but insisted she would never harm him. In an emotional interview, Shauna shared how Abigail and Liam reacted to the news of Jared's death. Abigail cried uncontrollably for hours, while Liam was in shock and remained silent for a long time. A notable absence at Jared's funeral was that of his ex-wife Cheyenne and older children, Abigail and Liam. When Christina told Shauna that didn't want her at the ceremony, Shauna responded that if she couldn't attend, neither would their children. Almost a year after the murder, in January 2023, the first suspect was finally arrested. Before that, the police have remained silent on the progress of the investigation, only admitting that a lot of time and resources are needed. A new clue has been found when a dark blue Ford F-150, possibly related to the case, caused an accident and then fled in a crowded area. Fortunately, numerous cameras in the vicinity captured footage, allowing authorities to quickly identify the suspect. The vehicle was owned by 62 years old Henry Tennant, an unemployed man with a history of convictions. Henry was subsequently charged with multiple offenses, including second-degree premeditated murder using a firearm, participating in a conspiracy to commit murder, and setting up an ambush to obstruct the victim. Jacksonville Beach Police Chief Jonathan Paul Smith and City Prosecutor Melissa Nelson held a press conference to announce the charges against Henry. During the conference, it was revealed that Henry was not the only one involved. In exchange for a lighter sentence, he had agreed to testify against his accomplices. However, their names were not disclosed to protect the integrity of the ongoing investigation. As the investigation continued, it was discovered that Henry with his friend had been living in a rental house owned by Mario. The police questioned Henry's housemate, but he did not have any valuable information about the case. Although he lived with Henry, the housemate had no personal relationship with the owner, Mario, only paying rent through a middleman, Henry. A thorough search of the house led to a significant discovery, a hidden pistol in Henry's room. Ballistic tests later confirmed that this pistol was the murder weapon, further implicating Henry in the crime. Mario Fernandez was arrested on March 16, 2023, after his accomplice, Henry, pleaded guilty and agreed to testify against him. Mario was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and incitement to commit a serious crime. Rumors soon emerged that Shauna was the mastermind behind the murder. These allegations were supported by two key witnesses, her former lover, a fitness trainer, and a tattoo artist she regularly visited. The fitness trainer revealed that Shauna said that she really hates her ex-husband, Jared, and had wished for his death. The tattoo artist shared a similar account, stating that Shauna had complained about the ongoing legal battles with Jared and had inquired about potential ways to silence him permanently. Shauna initially made the inquiry in a joking manner, but she repeated it months later, showing her serious intent. Despite denying all allegations and initially stating her to cooperate with the investigation, but Shauna moved to Washington with her children a few months after Mario's arrest. On August 17, 2023, Shauna was arrested in her Washington apartment and was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and incitement to commit a serious crime. She was extradited to Florida to stand trial alongside Mario and the other suspects. It is believed that Shauna's motives stem from her complicated relationship with Jared, as well as the desire to avoid sharing custody of their two children and the desire to have complete control over shared assets. The case is ongoing and charges are being pursued against everyone involved. Henry, an individual associated with the case, has pleaded guilty and is cooperating with the investigation in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence. Even so, he faces a minimum sentence of 15 years in prison, which would be life-altering given his advanced age. Mario Fernandez, Shauna's husband and a co-conspirator, has partially admitted his guilt, but refusing to testify against his wife. In contrast, Shauna denies all charges. However, prosecutors are asking for the death penalty or life imprisonment without parole for both Shauna Gardner and Mario Fernandez Saldana. Meanwhile, their 3 children are in the care of their maternal grandparents, Starling and Shelley Gardner, and their aunt, Sarah. The case of Jessica Chambers. On December 6, 2014, at 20:09, emergency services responded to a report of a car on fire in a rural area. The first firefighters to arrive discovered a burning car and began extinguishing the flames immediately. The interior of the car was filled with thick black smoke that rose rapidly. As the rescuers poured foam on the car, they accidentally saw a dark figure slowly emerging from the nearby bushes. The figure looked like a young woman. The fire department approached and discovered that it was a young woman. She was severely burned, wearing only her underwear. The extent of her injuries, with burns covering her entire body. Her clothes had been burned, her skin was melting and slowly dripping, and her entire body was bleeding. Her hair had turned into a black ash, and her face was black with soot. Rescuers carefully wrapped the young woman in a blanket as she lay on the ground, waiting for paramedics to arrive. Firefighters were at her side, tending to her. Although she could barely move her lips due to the severity of her injuries, the woman still managed to speak. When asked for her attacker's name, some emergency responders heard the names Derek or Derek. She was airlifted from the small town to a hospital in Memphis. Unfortunately, the young woman's condition became critical. With approximately 93% of her body burned, she died from her injuries just 4 hours after arriving. The victim was identified as Jessica Chambers, a 19-year-old local resident. Jessica grew up in Cortland, where her mother and grandmother lived nearby. Her father and stepmother also lived in the same town but in a different location. She was a petite woman, but Jessica had a strong and determined personality. She experienced a rather complicated living environment. About her family, her father pleaded guilty to manufacturing methamphetamine and was arrested for drunk driving in the early 2000s. In 2006, her 28-year-old neighbor was shot multiple times in her yard. Growing up in such a negative environment, Jessica developed a rebellious personality. She smoked, argued with her parents, had unstable relationships with boyfriends, and had legal troubles. Jessica's behavior became more evident at the age of 17, after the death of her brother Alan in a car accident in 2012. She moved out of her mother's house a few months later because her mother did not approve of Jessica's new boyfriend. Jessica's childhood was very difficult. Her father was in prison for a while, but in 2014, he was released and worked as a mechanic at the local police department. Jessica used to deal illegal drugs and had ties to local gangs. However, Jessica is sweet and funny, and is respected and loved by most people. News of a burning car quickly spread throughout her small town. Jessica's father was quickly notified of the car fire. Upon hearing the news, he rushed to inform Jessica's mother of the tragic incident. They rushed to the hospital. Jessica's death shocked the nation, attracting widespread attention. Hundreds attended her funeral on December 13th, a memorial service to honor an active and ambitious teenager who had been a cheerleader and had big dreams. A thorough investigation into the high-profile case was launched, attracting great public interest. To assist local authorities, the FBI, ATF, and the U.S. Marshals were called in. Initial investigations suggested that the fire may have been caused by a car accident, but this theory was quickly dismissed. A closer inspection of the scene revealed no signs of emergency braking or obstructions, and an examination of the burned-out vehicle revealed no damage or signs of collision on the body. Arson therefore became the leading theory, but the police faced a challenge due to a lack of clues and evidence, slowing down the investigation. Following her death, some believed that Jessica had inadvertently put herself in danger by associating with a local gang. However, gang members have strongly denied any involvement and sent condolences to Jessica's family. The police have summoned several people for questioning, but have yet to gather any clues. The investigation has stalled. No suspects have been found, nor a motive for such a brutal act. Public pressure for the investigation to seek justice has slowed the investigation and continuously provided false clues about Jessica's life. Several theories have emerged on social media, suggesting that Brian Rudd, Jessica's ex-boyfriend from high school, may have acted out of jealousy. Another theory is that Jessica sold low-quality drugs to someone for a few $100s, potentially angering a drug dealer who sought revenge. District Attorney John Champion described the case as the most mysterious he has worked on in his 22 years in the county. He has been investigating Jessica's case since December, working with local police and multiple agencies, including the MBI, FBI, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, and the U.S. Marshals Service. During the investigation, they interviewed more than 130 people, some of whom have since been re-interviewed, including individuals named Eric and Derek. Despite these efforts, no suspects have been arrested. Police have recreated the final week of Jessica's life in detail. On December 5, 2014, her last day, Jessica received a cell phone call from a friend, urging her to drive to the M&M Mini Mart. There, she purchased $14 worth of gas and left at 5:15 p.m. About 30 minutes later, at 5:45 p.m., she contacted her mother to say she would be home soon. At that time, Jessica had her hair tied in a bun and was wearing camouflage pajama pants. After a few more stops, including one at an unidentified house and another in the nearest town, Jessica arrived at the location where her life would tragically end. It is likely that the person who would eventually take her life was in the car with her at the time. Meanwhile, surveillance footage captured a man in a striped shirt filling a gas tank and then driving off in the same direction as Jessica. Despite this clue, no further information about the man's movements after that point was available. Jessica's cell phone records revealed important information about her final moments. They indicated that she spent approximately 10 to 15 minutes near a stoplight on Highway 2, heading toward Batesville. However, there was an unexplained 62-minute gap between 6:30 p.m. and 7:32 p.m. By 7:30 p.m., her phone was at the location on Heron Road where her burning car was later discovered. Many questions remain about what Chambers was doing during this mysterious hour and what ultimately led to her tragic fate. The investigation was slow going. It wasn't until December 2015, in a separate case involving charges of illegal possession of weapons, narcotics, and counterfeit goods, that 17 suspected gang members were arrested. At the time, District Attorney John Champion did not expect any gang members to be directly involved in the arson. However, during plea negotiations, gang members were given the opportunity to cooperate with the investigation. As a result, they identified Quentin Tellis, a man who had been with victim Jessica about an hour before the fire. In February 2016, police temporarily closed the case to conduct a further investigation and determine the motive behind Jessica's disappearance. The lack of an official suspect led to a surge of unfounded speculation circulating online and throughout the town. As a result, the case attracted the attention of the police online, and a Facebook page called Justice for Jessica was created, offering a $50,000 reward for any information or clues that could lead to the arrest of the perpetrator. Rumors also circulated online that Jessica, who had previously dated African American men, had been targeted by white supremacists for her involvement in interracial relationships. However, others suggested that the perpetrator was African American because Jessica had been in a gang, and that she may have tried to leave and was killed. none of these theories were ever officially confirmed. After examining Jessica's cell phone and social media activity, police were able to discover who she had been communicating with in the hours before her death. The investigation focused on Quentin Tellis, who initially claimed that their meeting had been arranged and communicated via text message, and that he barely knew her, simply asking her for a ride home. However, further analysis of their messages uncovered inconsistencies in his story, leading to his arrest for the arson murder of Jessica Chambers. Text messages showed that Quentin had sent Jessica several intimate advances on the day of the tragedy. The timeline of events began when Jessica texted Quentin at 9:02 a.m. to say she had just woken up, and Quentin replied shortly afterwards that he had also woken up. Then, at 10:09 a.m., Quentin texted Jessica saying, "I'm ready." After the text, Jessica drove to the M&M gas station and was captured on surveillance footage leaving M&M a few minutes later, presumably to pick up Tellis. They then picked up a friend of Jessica's around 10:49 a.m. Jessica dropped Quentin off at around 2:03 p.m. Quentin sent Jessica another text, this time apparently asking for some affection. It was the fourth time in 4 days that he had asked for intimacy via text. Deleted texts were also recovered, including, "I'm so horny," and "Come lay with me," but Jessica did not respond. The passenger seat in Jessica's burned car was found reclined, a common position for intimate activity in a vehicle. Prosecutors used this as evidence to suggest that the two had engaged in or attempted to engage in intimate relations on the night of the incident. Quentin was charged with arson and Jessica's murder on February 24th. Building a solid case took time. Quentin Tellis' trial began in 2017 in Batesville, Mississippi, about 50 miles south of Memphis. To ensure safety, the trial had strict security measures in place, including segregating the jury and using metal detectors to screen attendees before they entered the courtroom. Prosecutor John Champion warned the jury that they would have to see horrifying images of Jessica Chambers' burned body and hear testimony from about 35 witnesses. According to police, Jessica met Quentin on Thanksgiving in November 2014. Quentin was 7 years older than Jessica at the time and had previously attended the same high school, which she had started in October 2014. Quentin had recently been released from prison, where he had served time for burglary. In court, prosecutor John Champion presented evidence of a series of text messages exchanged between Quentin and Jessica, including one on the day of her death in which Quentin asked for intimacy. And the front seat position of Jessica's burned car was found to be adjusted downward, consistent with the text messages found. Prosecutor John Champion claimed that Quentin attempted to end her life by strangling her, then, thinking she was dead, doused her with gasoline and set her on fire. A friend of Jessica's reported that the three of them spent the day before the incident driving together in Jessica's car. On the day of the incident, Quentin eventually admitted to police that he had seen Jessica that night and had gone to a fast food restaurant with her. However, Quentin claimed that he had an alibi, saying that he was with friends at the time of the fire. However, the friends he claimed to be with did not verify his alibi. Interestingly, a store surveillance camera captured Quentin a few miles away, buying a phone card for an acquaintance in Louisiana. FBI Special Agent Dustin Blunt revealed that Quentin had deleted Jessica's contact information and their text messages from his phone shortly after her death. When asked about this action, Quentin claimed that he was not trying to hide anything. He explained that he had deleted her contact number because he did not want to keep a deceased person's phone number in his phone since it would no longer be used. Notably, records show that Quentin sent private text messages to Jessica on the day of her death. FBI agent Dustin determined that Tellis and Chambers met through a mutual friend at a gas station in their hometown of Cortland. The two spent time together frequently, often driving around. Notably, Quentin lived with his mother in a trailer near the convenience store where Jessica was last seen before her murder. Notably, his DNA was found on Jessica's keys, and cell phone records confirmed his presence at the location on the night of the murder. Quinton, who maintained his innocence throughout the trial, was told by defense attorney Darla Palmer, who advised the jury to reject the cell phone location evidence, that it did not prove Quinton and Jessica were in the same place at the same time. Quinton repeatedly proclaimed his innocence to police. Even when threatened with the death penalty, he told police that he was telling the truth and was incapable of harming anyone. His family believes that police unfairly targeted Quinton due to the highly publicized racial tensions surrounding the case. To determine whether Jessica's murder was related to other recent fires in the area, police looked into possible connections to fires in Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama. However, no connection was found. Despite this, the investigation has yet to produce conclusive evidence about a motive. Police said they have pursued several theories but have made little progress. Typically, identifying a suspect in a homicide is a relatively quick process, as law enforcement often relies on witnesses and informants on the street for leads. In this case, despite extensive community cooperation, DNA collection, and polygraph testing, no arrests have been made. Quinton Tellis' 2017 trial ended in a retrial. By the time the retrial began in 2018, Quinton was facing new investigations in Louisiana. He was being investigated for possible involvement in the death of student Ming Chin Xia, as well as for using stolen bank cards. In May 2019, Quinton was formally charged with second-degree murder in connection with the death of Ming Chin Xia. Sherry Flowers testified at the second trial that she picked up a hitchhiker the night of the incident. However, she did not recognize Quinton in court and admitted that she did not know the man she picked up. According to Sherry, a man flagged her down, and she stopped. She agreed to give the man a ride, describing him as a thin to medium-sized African-American man in his 20s. This description did not match Quinton, who was 26 at the time and 5 feet 9 inches. When asked why she did not contact the police in the first place, Flowers explained that she could not remember the incident and did not think it was related to the case. Prosecutors claimed that giving a hitchhiker a ride gave Quinton the opportunity to return to Jessica's car and set it on fire. However, the defense disputed the timing of the trip, arguing that the driver, Sherry, was unsure of the exact time she picked up the hitchhiker, only remembering that she had picked someone up. During the investigation, Jessica's car keys were found in a ditch 2 days after her death, near the location where the hitchhiker was picked up. The defense objected to admitting the keys into evidence, arguing that it was impossible to prove where the keys had been before they were discovered. During Quinton Tellis' retrial, the jury visited the crime scene and heard additional testimony. The second trial was extremely emotional. Witnesses broke down on the stand, and spectators wept as pictures of the young woman, Jessica Chambers' burned stomach and face, were shown. Despite a second trial, the jury was unable to reach a verdict, deadlocked for the second time in 2 years on the question of Quinton Tellis' guilt in the arson of Jessica Chambers and her car. Although the suspect has been tried twice, no verdict has been reached and the case remains officially unsolved. Online police continue to search social media for any clues that may have been overlooked. Jessica Chambers' death initially attracted significant media attention. Over time, as media interest waned, the story attracted the attention of internet police around the world. One aspect of the case that remains widely discussed is what happened to Jessica between the time she left home and her death. On the night of the incident, Jessica left home at 5 p.m. and told her mother that she was going to a nearby gas station. Surveillance footage from the gas station shows Jessica visiting the station twice. The footage shows Jessica filling up, then walking toward the store and waving to someone off camera before approaching them. The identity of the person Jessica waved to on the day of her death remains the subject of much speculation. A personal tragedy becomes a public spectacle when it evokes widespread compassion and support. The Justice for Jessica Facebook memorial page, run by Jessica's half-sister, is a prime example. The page brought together people from around the world who were moved by the tragic story of a young woman burned alive. As a result, Jessica's family and friends received an outpouring of support in the form of letters, words of encouragement, and donations. People also donated gifts and books in her name. A memorial quilt was made of bright pink patches with a zebra print, along with her photo and her birth and death dates. The quilt was particularly notable because it was made by well-wishers from all over the world. One mysterious detail about the quilt was a square stitched with the phrase "secret group," a phrase whose meaning remains unknown to this day. No one has yet been held accountable for Jessica's tragic death. Quentin Tellis, a 29-year-old man already serving time for another crime, remains a suspect, but justice for Jessica has yet to be served. Sadly, Jessica's mother, Lisa, passed away on October 29, 2021, at the age of 52, without being able to see justice for her daughter. The possibility of a third trial in Jessica's case, which involved the horrific act of being burned alive, remains uncertain. The case of Anne Margaret Carabin. Anne Margaret was born on April 5, 1959, in Poland, specifically in the city of Białystok, where she spent her childhood. Later, she moved to Canada to start a new life. She decided to settle in Mississauga, a large city in the province of Ontario, and met a man, Mr. Carabin. They got married, and in 1987, their first daughter, Caroline, was born, followed by Catherine a year later, and became a housewife, taking care of the home and children while her husband worked to provide for the family. Despite the appearance of having a happy family, Anne's husband showed little interest in parenting. He quickly grew bored with family life. As the girls grew up, more contradictions emerged in their views, and eventually, they decided to divorce. It was a difficult period, as her husband abandoned the children and resisted paying alimony, leading Anne to apply to the court. The case dragged on, causing significant financial and emotional stress. To stay afloat, Anne needed to work, and at one point, she even worked 2 jobs simultaneously, from morning to evening without days off. It was extremely hard. Despite her hard work, there was barely enough money for the 3 of them. She had no energy left to fully perform her maternal duties. During this time, Anne was constantly at work. Her children missed her dearly, hoped that she would overcome the difficulties and everything would be all right. Unfortunately, the situation only worsened. The divorce process dragged on for an extended period and fell into depression. This emotional turmoil began to take a toll, especially as she was in a foreign country and could not see her loved ones to share her feelings. She longed to find a new partner for support, yet she didn't even have time for her children, let alone a personal life. Even friends were hard to come by, as maintaining friendships required time she simply did not have. Instead, Anne found solace in alcohol. She began to drink a little to fall asleep faster and relax. A significant turning point for her came when she met a man named Doug at one of her jobs. They started dating, and gradually, she introduced him to her daughters. Doug seemed like a suitable partner for the future, so they decided to get married. At first, everything went well, and Anne believed she had finally found happiness, thinking their life would return to normal. In the first year of marriage, Anne gave birth to a son, Robert. However, from then on, the relationship became increasingly tense. Doug exhibited bad character traits, such as aggression, intemperance. He constantly drank, lost his temper, and behaved unpredictably. His actions escalated to the point where Caroline and Catherine had to intervene to protect their mother from beatings. The worst part was that Doug targeted not only Anne but also the girls, and continued to seek solace in alcohol, consuming more over time. Soon, she became dependent on it. When intoxicated, she was not aggressive but would simply fall asleep. Doug took advantage of the situation, and according to her daughters, he repeatedly abused them. This continued for quite a while before Anne discovered what was happening. When she finally confronted Doug about it, he attacked her and threatened her. Initially, she was at a loss about what to do. Despite her children's complaints, she was terrified of leaving her husband, plunging back into poverty, loneliness, and depression. Caroline took matters into her own hands, trying desperately to achieve justice and stop the violence. Unfortunately, no one listened to her or took any action. The Supreme Court could not overlook Doug's behavior forever, especially as he became increasingly cruel. Finally, in 2001, Doug was jailed for domestic violence, with additional charges added for drunk driving. However, his abuse accusations went unaddressed, leaving the girls feeling that justice had not been served. Any further complaints were simply ignored by the authorities. Caroline and Catherine felt relief that Doug, the dangerous man, was isolated and no longer posed a threat to them. Nevertheless, it was also the beginning of a new life for Anne, who was left alone with her 3 children. At this time, her daughters held high hopes that their mother could pull herself together, quit drinking, and improve their lives. However, the family dynamic suffered as they were all traumatized and began to drink even more than before, significantly worsening the situation. She could no longer control her addiction, spending all the money she earned from several jobs on alcohol. Caroline and Catherine understood that their mother needed help but felt powerless to assist her. By that time, they had become teenagers, could partially care for themselves and their younger brother. This allowed them a bit of independence, but they still felt a significant lack of their mother's attention. As they grew up, conflicts increased and disagreements became common. The atmosphere in the house turned tense, with constant arguments. The situation deteriorated further when both schoolgirls experimented with alcohol and marijuana. They spoke very badly of their mother, and as they entered a difficult adolescence, the sisters began to skip school. The situation at home is escalating. Those around them noticed the decline in their standard of living. Caroline and Catherine looked at their peers, realized that their friends had nice houses, beautiful clothes, delicious food, and loving parents, all of which they lacked. Even an evening dinner with their mother did not resemble family get-togethers. Family members had become very distant from each other. Some acquaintances supported the sisters, fed them, and gave them various things, but all of this was not enough for the teenage girls to feel normal. At the same time, they were very smart, energetic, and active. Teachers described their intelligence as above average. They succeeded in education and were expected to find decent jobs in the future. However, at that moment, they dreamed of becoming popular, wearing fashionable clothes like other girls who had no issues with their parents. Yet, there was something alarming in the behavior of these children. Some teachers noticed that Caroline and Catherine had a real talent for manipulating people. They easily achieved what they needed from others, and if they did something wrong, they often got away with it. Later, they dropped out of school altogether. As they grew, their dissatisfaction with their mother only grew, and soon real hatred for her awakened. They openly declared that she was a worthless mother who only thought of herself and her alcohol. Caroline and Catherine's turned to relatives, their father, and others for help, but no one did anything to assist them. Their negativity toward their mother only intensified. By 2002, they could no longer watch how she was ruining herself and them. In their minds, they began to mature a frightening plan. At that time, Caroline was 15 years old and Catherine was 14, but this did not stop them from developing a plan for a bloody massacre. They wanted to help their mother, but in a very distorted way. Their main goal was to save her from suffering. They wanted to do this in such a way as to gain popularity while also remaining winners. Caroline and Catherine knew that a life insurance policy for $200,000 had been issued for their mother. The mother had taken it out as soon as she had the opportunity at work, in case something happened to her. In this way, she insured and provided for her children. But Caroline and Catherine did not want to wait. They decided it was time to start an independent life. The sisters understood that they would not receive money if it were proven that their mother died at their hands, so the plan had to be carefully worked out. Thus, a school project called How to Kill a Mother was created. Initially, even they themselves perceived it as a joke. They shared it with their classmates and hoped to attract enthusiasts who would help find the best way to carry out the crime. They showed interest and constantly discussed various details of the murder so that they could execute it without getting caught. They began communicating with other teenagers and openly discussing everything in a specially created group. Their friends chose options, considering a gun or a knife. However, both sisters did not want blood and suffering for their victim, so they concluded that the most painless, simple way to kill their mother was by drowning. For some reason, they believed this was the easiest method with which they could quickly and easily cope, especially leave no traces. Naturally, all of this was actively discussed on social media, and many young people were involved in developing a plan for a murder without even realizing they were discussing a real crime. Nevertheless, everything quickly turned into serious crime planning. Caroline and Catherine began discussing it with classmates in the hope of understanding what difficulties awaited them and how to divert police suspicions from themselves, avoid punishment. They talked about other issues, particularly how to guarantee money from the insurance policy. The sisters planned to collect $200,000 from their mother's life insurance and actively discussed with classmates what they wanted to buy with this money. Caroline and Catherine envisioned buying a new cozy house and cultivating a plantation of marijuana there. With the first harvest and sale of substances, they planned to travel with friends to Europe, particularly Amsterdam. Ultimately, the sisters paid a lot of attention to their plot, which seemed meticulously thought out to the smallest detail. Finally, on the evening of January 11, 2003, Caroline and Catherine decided to kill their mother. However, disagreements arose with their group of like-minded peers, as a party among teenagers was planned for the same day, and everyone feared that the murder could cancel the festivities. It seemed implausible that the school children still did not take the sisters' idea seriously. One way or another, they were persuaded to postpone the bloody act for a week. It was rescheduled for January 18th. On that Saturday morning, the daughters approached their mother, unusually offering her a bottle of vodka. This made her very happy and blissfully. They began pouring shot after shot while simultaneously adding medicine to each glass, substances that serve as painkillers which, when combined with alcohol, could have very dangerous effects, including potential lethality. However, the sisters' goal was not to poison her. They did not even particularly hide the fact that they were giving her pills. Their mother saw this but willingly took them along with the strong alcohol, believing it would help her. All of this happened literally live on air. Caroline and Catherine constantly wrote to their friends in a messaging app, providing updates on the different stages of the process. When the bottle of vodka ran out, their mother was very drunk and sleepy. One of their friends even wished them luck and gave them a last piece of advice: to wear disposable gloves. Caroline and Catherine took his advice and used protective equipment, which logically made one of their classmates an accomplice in the crime they were about to commit, as he seemed unaware of the seriousness of the situation. As their mother's condition worsened, due to the pills combined with alcohol, the effects intensified. Finally, they suggested she take a relaxing bath and also get a massage. She agreed. They helped their mother to get up. She could barely stand on her feet, so it took them about half an hour to get to the bathroom. They then helped her undress. Caroline and Catherine suggested that their mother needed a back massage, asked her to lie on her stomach. Obviously, in her state, and could not think rationally, so she complied with this absurd demand. At this point, the eldest daughter began to drown her. She tried to resist but lacked the strength to fight back. She pushed her hands against the bottom of the bathtub with all her might, and could not rise to breathe. The sisters believed that in order for she to drown, it was necessary to keep her submerged for 4 minutes. Catherine stood nearby, periodically counting down to support her sister. Naturally, when Caroline finally let go of their mother and showed no signs of life, Caroline and Catherine was elated that their plan had worked. They even screamed with joy. Afterward, they informed their group that the project had succeeded. Now they had to cover their tracks and divert suspicion from themselves. This had also been carefully planned. They arranged to meet friends at a restaurant, leaving their mother's body in the bathroom, and went to Odnoklassniki. Their first toast was specifically for the successful murder of their mother. Caroline and Catherine spent several hours there before returning home. A few minutes after they arrived, an emergency call came in from distraught people claiming they had found their mother's body in the bathtub. The ambulance attempted to resuscitate her, but of course, it was too late, as she had already been in the water for several hours. Caroline and Catherine crying constantly and appearing inconsolable. Interestingly, to play out this tragic comedy, one of them had even trained with someone from Odnoklassniki who was involved in a theater club. The scene was prepared and executed very carefully. From the outside, it seemed that the drunk mother had simply fallen asleep in the bathtub and drowned, making it look like an accident. However, the experience of the police suggested otherwise. Detectives rarely deal with drownings, most often it's small children who die when left unattended, so it appeared strange for an adult woman, especially one in a state of strong intoxication, to get into the bathtub unaided. How could she even manage to undress, climb in without falling and hurting herself? Everything seemed illogical. Nevertheless, the sisters had planned everything well, even leaving a glass from which their mother had drunk in the bathroom to reinforce the police's suspicion of an accident. They managed to eliminate any traces of a struggle. Of course, no one had entered the house, which meant there were no strangers present. Naturally, given their age and the fact that they were upset teenage girls, no one expected that they were capable of drowning their own mother. In any case, the police needed to talk to Caroline and Catherine to clarify the details. Both sisters told an emotional story about how they discovered their mother without signs of life after returning from a restaurant. They admitted that when they left home, she had been drinking, but there was nothing unusual about it since she had been an alcoholic for several years, and had never been aggressive. Rather, she tried to drown her sorrows from hard work days and failures in her personal life. According to them, they returned around 2 a.m. and immediately discovered their mother's body. They called emergency services to report the situation. Now, it was necessary to determine where Caroline and Catherine would live until they reached adulthood. Their younger brother, Robert, who was only 3 years old, was with his father at the time. Thanks to his sisters, the boy was doomed to grow up without a mother. Meanwhile, forensic scientists were working at the scene of the alleged accident. They relied on the temperature of the water, which had long since cooled to the level of the ambient air in the room, indicating that and had been dead for several hours before she was discovered. No signs of violence could be found on her body. However, Caroline and Catherine did not manage to commit the perfect crime so as to go unnoticed. The forensic expert noted that traces of desperate attempts remained on the victim's body, as if she had risen from under the water to take a breath while struggling against someone who was holding her. Barely noticeable marks were found on the tips of her fingers. In addition, and tried so hard to save herself that she tore off several nails. Despite this, after a toxicological examination, all the doubts of the police were dispelled. A lethal dose of alcohol was found in her body. Therefore, her death was immediately recognized as an accident resulting from drowning while under the influence of alcohol. The investigation was closed. Their aunt took Caroline and Catherine, becoming their guardian. As the girls planned, they received money from their mother's life insurance, part of which went to summer camp. It seemed that this initially humorous school project had evolved into the perfect crime, one that would evade justice. Caroline and Catherine simply could not remain silent about their success. They clearly did not feel the slightest remorse. They bragged that they were able to not only kill their mother but also get money while avoiding justice. Now they wanted to fulfill their dream of buying a beautiful house and planting it with weeds. However, they did not have time to implement their large-scale plan. 11 months after their mother's death, one of Caroline's friends went to the police to report the killers. From the very beginning, she was aware of what was happening. She so tormented by the pangs of conscience that she could not sleep normally. The friend revealed the truth about the planning and preparation of the crime that took place online, providing detectives access to her computer, where all these dialogues were recorded. Not only did the police see how this cruel plan was drawn up, but there were also numerous confessions from each of the sisters. However, the investigators believed that something more substantial was needed, so they decided to use this friend to obtain new evidence. Listening and recording devices were installed in the car. Now all that was left was to catch the criminals in a confession. In fact, it was quite simple to do this because Caroline and Catherine literally could not talk about anything else except the murder. Even after almost a year, it was enough to bring up this topic for them to start describing the process and their skills as killers. They continued to willingly talk about this event with obvious pride and without remorse. However, until that moment, few took the statements of theirs seriously. Now their talkativeness allowed the police to probe the details of the insidious plan. In particular, the sisters mentioned the pills that were never found during the initial toxicology examination. The test simply had not been carried out in full. After a lethal dose of alcohol was detected in the blood, everything else was discarded as unimportant. Finally, all the secrets became clear. On January 21, 2004, at 7 a.m., the police arrived at the house where Caroline and Catherine lived. Both girls were arrested and taken to the police station in their pajamas. They were still asleep. The computers of the main suspects were also confiscated. During interrogations, both denied their guilt. They tried their best to demonstrate innocent behavior. They even refused to wear the clothes that the police offered them. Both remained in their pajamas. This was probably intended to enhance their innocence. Of course, no one believed them. Under the pressure of evidence, the older girl, Caroline, quickly cracked. She burst into tears and admitted that she had killed her mother. Curiously, the younger sister Catherine could not be broken. She withstood hours of police interrogation, but still insisted on her innocence. Nevertheless, by this time, detectives had restored the browser history and harvested data from the computers, which allowed them to discover new shocking details of the cold-blooded crime. Investigators reviewed all the correspondence that the witness had provided. It was evident that Caroline and Catherine were unhappy due to their mother's alcohol addiction. From these electronic sources, sufficient data was available to accuse the sisters of premeditated murder in the Supreme Court of Canada. Given their age, juvenile justice was involved in the case. Curiously, both were released on bail and placed under house arrest pending trial. In late 2005, they went to trial and were convicted of first-degree murder. Eventually, in June 2006, the hearings began, and it was notable that they wore the same pajamas in which they had been arrested. Many believe this was a deliberate manipulation of the jury to elicit sympathy for the sisters. However, this did not significantly impact the prosecution, which presented two motives for the murder: the pursuit of insurance money and the desire to escape the vicious cycle of their mother's alcohol addiction. Judging by the correspondence, the sisters even saw this as a means of providing relief for their suffering mother. During the hearings, dozens of other schoolmates appeared, all of whom had participated in the same project, played roles in the planning, and offered advice, which meant they could well have been considered accomplices. Ultimately, none of them were prosecuted, as it was determined that they did not fully grasp the seriousness of Caroline and Catherine's intentions, believed it was merely a game. With the solid foundation of evidence the prosecution had, Caroline and Catherine had no chance of escaping punishment. They were found guilty of first-degree murder. However, for minors under this charge, the maximum sentence was only 10 years in prison, of which they would serve only 6 years behind bars. The remaining 4 years would be under house arrest due to good behavior. The younger sister, Catherine, was released in 2009. By this time, Catherine was 21 years old. Shortly thereafter, Caroline was also released at 23. Under the Canadian Privacy and Protection Act, their names were not initially disclosed in the media. However, it was impossible to keep this information hidden for long, as they spoke too openly about their horrific crime. The defense did not succeed, and their identities were revealed. Nonetheless, this did not prevent them from starting a new life. Both sisters entered college and earned their degrees. Catherine graduated from law school, got married, while Caroline pursued a career in technology to become a scientist. Later, she became a single mother and fully understood the difficulties her own mother had struggled with in the past. 17 years after the cold-blooded murders, in 2020, Caroline spoke to the media. By this time, she was 33 years old. She stated that she had radically evaluated her actions and now regretted them every day. She viewed her mother as a strong woman who tried to keep her family afloat but became depressed due to ongoing financial problems and difficult relationships with men. Caroline herself was traumatized and, like her children, could not fully comprehend the magnitude of what was happening at that time. She simply decided to rid herself of what she deemed unwanted burdens. In 2012, a 17-year-old girl named Jessica Evans was living with her mother, Chris. Just before summer vacation, she met 22-year-old Jacob Wheeler, who had recently moved across the street to his brother's house. They connected at a party and quickly developed a bond. Jacob was a quiet country boy who had recently returned from a 3-year stint in Iraq. Although he was 5 years older than Jessica, Chris felt reassured and trusted him. On August 26, 2012, Jessica asked Chris for permission to join Jacob on a night fishing trip at the Little Wabash River, a popular location. Initially hesitant, Chris eventually agreed after Jessica persuaded her, but insisted that Jessica be careful and return home by 5 a.m. She assured her mother that she understood and would return to her sister Megan's house at that time to babysit her nephew Miles. Little did she know that this fishing trip would be her last. Just before midnight, Chris called Jessica to check on her. Jessica assured her mother that she was fine and that she and Jacob were nearly done fishing and would be home soon. However, when Chris woke up at 5 the next morning, she realized that Jessica had not returned home. This was unusual, especially since Jessica had plans to babysit her nephew. Concerned, Chris tried calling Jessica's cell phone, but there was no answer. She also sent text messages that went unanswered. Chris felt something was wrong. She was sure Jessica would inform her if plans changed. Chris went to Jacob's house, but his brother Jeremy said that Jacob hadn't come home either. Jeremy wasn't worried because he believed Jacob could handle himself. However, by 9 a.m., Jessica's family was beginning to worry. Chris thought it was possible that Jacob's truck had broken down or that they were stuck somewhere. After 12 hours without any news about Jessica and Jacob, Chris contacted the White County Sheriff's Office for assistance. Sheriff Doug Meyer, who was relaxing at home, received the call but wasn't overly concerned. He speculated that Jessica and Jacob might have run away together and figured they were likely okay, but he needed to find out where they had gone. The sheriff decided to request a warrant to trace Jessica's cell phone, but that could take some time. Meanwhile, the sheriff's deputies followed the family's advice and headed to the spot where Jessica and Jacob were supposed to be fishing. The area was remote, accessible only by gravel roads. The deputies found a 50-foot-long overgrown path that led to a popular fishing location. They saw clear signs that someone had been there, such as abandoned packages, but there were no signs of any trouble or crime. An extinguished campfire was present, but the area was clean, and Jacob's truck was missing. However, the sheriff's intuition about Jessica and Jacob led him to believe that nothing serious had happened. It seemed like they were simply hanging out together. Eventually, the sheriff obtained records from Jessica's cell phone carrier to help track her phone. They discovered that the phone's signal was coming from a tower near the campground area where she and Jacob had been fishing. This indicated that Jessica's phone was still active and nearby, which contradicted the sheriff's assumption that she had simply run away. If Jessica and Jacob were still there, why weren't they answering their phones? Investigators began to worry that they might be stranded, injured, or worse. News of Jessica and Jacob's disappearance quickly spread through Norris City, raising alarms in the community. Some speculated that they had just run away, but Chris was confident that Jessica would not do that. Upon learning that Jessica's cell phone was still in the vicinity of the fishing site, the sheriff's office felt a growing sense of unease about the situation. At dawn the following day, officers from the White County Sheriff's Office, along with neighboring law enforcement and many volunteers, returned to the fishing area to search for any traces of Jacob and Jessica. Their families also joined in the search. However, after 3 hours, they had no leads. Neither Jacob nor Jessica nor their pickup truck was found. The pickup must have been at the scene if something had happened to them. But what if they had discarded their phones and fled? If they had indeed left together, they would eventually create an electronic footprint. The police also checked their bank card usage to see if there had been any transactions but found no activity. While there were no significant findings in the bank statements, one clue emerged from Jessica's phone records. The police were aware of the midnight call from Chris, but Jessica had another phone conversation shortly after, around 12:30 a.m. on Sunday night. Investigators identified the person she spoke with as a young man named Ron Wooderson. His name was familiar to the police due to his past legal issues, raising their suspicions about his involvement. Consequently, they decided to interview Ron to understand the details of their conversation. Sheriff's deputies met with Ron and asked him about his last interaction with Jessica. He eventually acknowledged that he called her late at night, stating he was at a party with friends. Ron claimed he wanted Jessica to join him at the party, but when she mentioned she was busy fishing, Jacob, her boyfriend, grabbed the phone. Ron explained that Jacob had explicitly prohibited him from calling Jessica, which led to a heated argument, primarily fueled by Jacob's anger over Ron contacting his girlfriend. The deputies recorded the names of other party attendees and verified Ron's alibi. They found that everyone else confirmed he did not leave the party after the call. By the end of the day, search volunteers were ready to go home without any leads. However, one of Jacob's friends, while riding an ATV, discovered a pickup truck hidden in the woods behind an old farmhouse, about 2 miles from where Jacob and Jessica had been fishing. It turned out to be Jacob's truck. The situation quickly became distressing when they found a woman's body in the back of the truck, shot twice in the head. Her condition raised further alarm. She was partially clothed, with some of her clothes strewn on the ground nearby. Investigators suspected that more than just a murder had occurred. The victim had no identification, but in such a tight-knit community, that was not a significant issue. Some of the investigators recognized Jessica from her entire life, and it became clear that they had just discovered her body. The discovery of Jessica's body marked a turning point. This suggested that she may have met with a man before her death and may have fought back. Authorities hoped that the coroner could obtain DNA evidence from the crime scene. The police searched the area around the pickup and found shell casings that matched the 2 wounds on Jessica's head. The casings were located on the right side of the truck, next to a large bloodstain, indicating that Jessica had been shot at that location. As investigators examined Jacob's pickup truck, which was filled with fishing gear and personal belongings, they noted that Jacob was missing. A crucial clue emerged when they discovered blood in the driver's side cab of the truck. Blood samples were sent for DNA testing to determine whose blood it was and to locate Jacob. Law enforcement began to consider Jacob as a potential suspect, questioning whether he was a victim himself or if he was responsible for Jessica's death. Community suspicions arose, with some believing that Jacob, a veteran, had the skills to commit murder. Speculation swirled that a late-night phone call from Ron might have triggered a violent reaction from Jacob. Investigators grew increasingly concerned about Jacob's mental state, particularly if he felt he was losing Jessica. The day after Jessica's body was found, the police obtained a search warrant for Jacob's brother's house, suspecting that Jacob might be hiding there. Although they didn't find him, they discovered that one of his guns was missing. Jeremy, Jacob's brother, said there was no reason to worry. Jacob had simply taken the gun for a fishing trip, which he considered normal. However, investigators became concerned when they learned that the missing gun was a .22, matching the shell casings found at the crime scene. Despite this, Jacob's family insisted he was innocent, believing that he would have put his life on the line to protect Jessica if she had been in danger. As the week went by, the search for Jacob intensified. Police from multiple counties joined forces, deploying search teams, K-9 units, and aerial surveillance to locate him. The White County Crime Suppression Unit even offered a $2,000 reward for information leading to Jacob's capture. This reward prompted several calls to the sheriff's office with tips, but one was particularly noteworthy. An employee at a gas station located 12 miles from where Jessica's body was found reported seeing Jacob buy a pack of cigarettes on Sunday night, about a day after he and Jessica disappeared. The employee noted that Jacob was wearing a camouflage hooded sweatshirt and recalled seeing an ID card in his wallet that appeared to belong to Jacob Wheeler. This made Jacob the primary suspect in Jessica's case. As time passed, it seemed increasingly likely that Jacob was on the run. Investigators visited the gas station to review surveillance footage, where they spotted a man in a hooded sweatshirt who partially obscured his face and avoided looking directly at the camera. Although it was a warm night and would have been uncomfortable in such attire, it was difficult to confirm with certainty that he was Jacob. The man quickly purchased cigarettes and left the store. While the footage from one camera did not reveal his face, a second camera outside captured him getting into a car driven by a woman, a person one of the sheriff's deputies recognized. Police quickly went to the woman's home, where they saw the car from the gas station video parked nearby. When questioned by investigators, the woman admitted to driving the man to the gas station but insisted he wasn't Jacob, claiming he was her boyfriend instead. This left the identity of the man in the video as a dead end, and all police attention turned back to Jacob. Detectives believed he was alive and suspected his brother Jeremy of hiding him. They searched his house at night to catch him off guard, but even after a second search, there was still no sign that he had been there. After Jacob disappeared, his brother and father were certain he had nothing to do with Jessica's death. His father, Harold, was determined to prove his son's innocence. He believed he was searching for Jacob's body, not the body of his son. 6 days later, Sheriff Doug Meyer received a call from Harold, who mentioned that he had discovered something that others had overlooked. He believed he saw car parts in a wooded area just a quarter-mile from where Jacob and Jessica were camping. Investigators decided to follow up on this lead and found some car parts, specifically pieces that belonged to the fender of a pickup truck. The area where the parts were located showed damage to the trees, indicating that a pickup truck had driven into the woods and through the trees, causing damage. However, it was clear that these were not Jacob's truck. While the connection to the crime was unclear, the discovery piqued investigators' interest as they had no other leads. One of the car parts had a serial number, which the police were able to look up online to determine the specific model of the pickup truck. In a small town, it's relatively easy to track down such a vehicle. One of the sheriff's deputies was familiar with a man named Danny Costin, a 36-year-old electrician from White County, who drove a similar truck. But could he be involved in a violent crime? Danny had never caused trouble, had no criminal record, and was a well-known member of the community. Investigators decided to visit his workplace to speak with him. They found his pickup truck in the parking lot, which had considerable damage consistent with the parts discovered in the woods. As the investigator examined the pickup truck, Sheriff Doug Meyer questioned Danny about the damage. Danny explained that he had gone fishing on the Little Wabash River but had difficulty launching his boat because he was very drunk. He couldn't remember much from that night, but he did recall that it had been around 1 a.m. on the same night that Jacob and Jessica went fishing. He insisted that he didn't see anyone else in the area during his time there. Meanwhile, investigators made a significant discovery. They found a considerable amount of blood in the back of Danny's pickup truck. He was visibly shocked when they informed him about it. The sheriff advised Danny that if he had anything to share, he should do so now. Danny then revealed that he had been in the woods that night and had witnessed Jacob attack Jessica twice. However, this account did not clarify why there was blood in his truck. Forensic analysis confirmed it was human blood. Investigators took Danny to the police station for further questioning. He reiterated that he was drunk, went to the Little Wabash River, and encountered Jacob and Jessica. He mentioned that Jacob had gone into the woods, leaving him alone with Jessica. Danny claimed that Jessica had come on to him of her own accord. He said they went to his truck and parked 2 miles away behind an abandoned farmhouse. According to him, they had consensual intimate contact until Jacob found them in the dark. An argument broke out between Jacob and Jessica, during which Jacob attacked her. Danny stated that he felt scared when Jacob approached him, leading to a struggle during which the gun went off, injuring Jacob. He claimed this shot was accidental. In a panic, he placed Jacob in the back of his pickup truck, worried that no one would believe his story of self-defense, so he concealed the body where it wouldn't be found. Danny provided detailed information about where he had left Jacob's body. The police were skeptical of Danny's story, as it did not align with Jessica's character. His account of how Jessica willingly came with him, only for Jacob to show up unexpectedly, seemed implausible. Ultimately, it was determined that he had attacked Jacob, thus confirming the suspicions held by Jacob's family. Consequently, Danny Costin was arrested. Investigators followed Danny's directions to find Jacob's body, venturing deeper into the woods along a dirt road. After 6 days of searching, they discovered Jacob's body with a bullet wound in his head. Forensic evidence contradicted Danny's claims. Blood found in Jacob's pickup truck, which belonged to Jacob, did not align with Danny's narrative. He had previously stated that he placed Jacob's body in his own truck, raising questions about the source of the blood. During a reinterrogation, inconsistencies in Danny's account led him to admit the truth. He explained that he attempted to drive his truck to launch a boat, but, being very drunk and faced with dense woods, he sought help from Jacob and Jessica. Although Jacob advised against it because of Danny's intoxication, they eventually agreed to help him. After climbing into the back of Jacob's truck, Danny, armed with a pistol, unexpectedly shot Jacob in the head through the driver's side window, in full view of Jessica, who was terrified and screamed. Danny then pulls Jacob out of the truck, saying he has no idea why he shot Jacob or what his next actions will be. Jessica begs Danny to spare her life, which prompts the sheriff to ask if she will agree to intimacy in exchange for her safety. Danny interpreted her desperate plea for self-preservation as an offer, and he proceeded to assault her in the back of Jacob's truck. Despite her begging, he shot her, asserting afterward that he did not know why he committed these acts. Afterward, he transported Jessica's body in Jacob's truck, driving to Wayne County to hide Jacob's body while discarding both his gun and Jacob's gun out of the window during the trip. The police have never recovered either firearm. On September 4, 2012, Danny appeared in court and pleaded not guilty. He later changed his testimony, claiming he had not been informed of his rights before questioning, but an appeals court dismissed his appeal. Video evidence from the interrogation showed that he was indeed read his rights. Additionally, police had strong evidence linking Danny to the crime. His truck contained Jacob's blood, and DNA from Jessica was found on his body. In January 2014, Candace Brown, Danny's girlfriend, was found guilty of lying to the authorities during the initial investigation. She had provided him with a false alibi. She was sentenced to 60 days in jail, 30 months of probation, 100 hours of community service, and was required to pay various court fees and fines. On August 20, 2013, Danny Costin was convicted and sentenced to 53 years in prison. Judge Tom Foster stated he was constrained by the plea agreement between the state and defense but believed Danny deserved a harsher sentence. Danny had agreed to waive a jury trial in return for lesser charges and a potentially reduced sentence if found guilty. Judge Foster noted that the court accepted this deal only with the consent of Jessica's and Jacob's families. On June 20, 2001, at 9:48 a.m. in Houston, Texas, Andrea Pia Yates called law enforcement and reported that she was feeling unwell and needed a police officer to come to her house. When the police arrived, they made a shocking discovery. Although Andrea seemed fine, her 5 children were found dead in front of her. Tragically, their mother had killed them, one after another. This case stunned the nation, revealing the dark turn of a seemingly happy family. Andrea was born Andrea Pia Kennedy in Houston, Texas, on July 2, 1964. She was the youngest of 5 children of Jutta Karen Kohler, a German immigrant, and Andrew Emmett Kennedy. She is a perfectionist by nature. Andrea graduated as valedictorian from Milby High School in 1982, served as an officer in the National Honor Society, and captained the swim team. After completing a 2-year pre-nursing program at the University of Houston, she graduated from the University of Texas Health Science Center and worked as a registered nurse at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center from 1986 to 1994. In 1989, 25-year-olds Andrea and NASA engineer Russell Rusty Yates met, eventually fell in love. They married nearly 4 years later, on April 17, 1993. Both were devoted Christians. Soon after their wedding, they shared their desire to have as many children as possible, believing it was God's plan for them. This belief was shaped by Michael Warrenicki's teachings, which suggested that women who pursued education would go to hell, as their primary purpose was to bear children. To prepare for their expected large family, Russell and Andrea bought a 4-bedroom house in Friendswood, Texas. In February 1994, they welcomed their first child, a son named Noah. Shortly after his arrival, Russell took a job in Florida, prompting the family to move temporarily to a small trailer in Seminole. Their second son, John, was born in December 1995. Before their third son, Paul, was born in 1997, the Yates family relocated back to Houston, where they lived in a GMC van. Despite being an excellent student and a loving wife, Andrea faced challenges with depression and bulimia. She confided in friends about her end one's own life thoughts during high school. After marrying Russell, Andrea's depression temporarily improved but returned after the birth of their fourth child, Luke. The first significant episode occurred on June 16, 1999, when Russell discovered Andrea trembling and biting her fingers. The next day, she attempted to end one's own life by overdosing on pills, leading to a critical condition that required hospitalization. Doctors prescribed antidepressants, but they did not help her. After, she made a desperate plea to Russell, asking to die, and even held a knife to her neck. She had to be hospitalized again, where she received multiple medications. This treatment quickly improved her state, and upon discharge, she was given Haldol. To aid in Andrea's recovery, Russell decided to move the family out of their GMC motorhome into a house. Initially, this change seemed beneficial, and Andrea's condition stabilized. Unfortunately, this improvement was temporary. In July 1999, Andrea suffered a nervous breakdown, resulting in 2 end-one's-own-life attempts and 2 psychiatric hospitalizations over the summer. Doctors diagnosed her with postpartum psychosis. Dr. Eileen Starbranch, Andrea's psychiatrist, advised Russell not to have more children, as it could worsen Andrea's mental health. Despite this warning, just 7 weeks after Andrea's hospital discharge, she became pregnant with their 5th child, Mary. Upon learning of her pregnancy, Andrea stopped taking Haldol to promote a healthy pregnancy. In March 2000, shortly after Mary Yates was born, Andrea's mental health showed some improvement. However, this improvement lasted only a year and ended with the death of her father on March 12, 2001. This loss caused Andrea's psychotic symptoms to re-emerge, leading her to harm herself and neglect to feed Mary. Her condition worsened, prompting her family to admit her to the hospital on April 1, 2001. After receiving treatment, she was discharged, but noticing his wife's ongoing instability, Russell requested his mother to come stay with them temporarily to assist with the children. A month after being hospitalized, Andrea began showing troubling behaviors again. On May 3, 2001, she filled the bathtub during the day. When her mother-in-law, Dora Yates, asked her why, Andrea gave a vague answer that worried the family. This prompted her husband Russell and his mother to arrange for her to be hospitalized within 24 hours. When her psychiatrist discussed the incident, it was seen as a potential end-one's-own-life attempt by drowning. A few days later, Andrea was released from the hospital but remained disoriented. Her husband returned her to the hospital, explaining that she was no longer responding to her medication. Yates continued to be under the care of Dr. Mohammed Saeed until June 20, 2001. After her husband left for work, she filled the bathtub with water and harmed her children one by one, believing she was saving them from evil. Her son Noah even tried to fight back, but she forced his head underwater until he stopped breathing. For her youngest child, Mary, Andrea placed her in the arms of her older brother Luke, thinking this would reunite them in the afterlife. Once all the children were drowned, Andrea placed their bodies under a blanket on the bed as if they were simply resting. At 9:48 a.m., Andrea called 911, requesting a police officer to come to her house. The operator, trying to understand the situation, asked if there was a disturbance, if she was feeling ill, or if there was another reason for her call. Andrea stated that she was ill, so the operator, following standard procedures, asked if she needed an ambulance. Andrea clarified that she only wanted a police officer to come to her home. The operator became concerned that Andrea might be experiencing domestic abuse and asked if her husband was home. Andrea replied that he was not. 8 minutes later, at 9:56 a.m., Andrea called her husband, Russell Yates, asking him to come home. Feeling alarmed by this unexpected call from his wife, who had a history of depression, Russell rushed home. Upon entering the home, the police found Andrea Yates sitting on the living room couch. In the bedroom, he was horrified to discover 4 children covered by a blanket, all deceased. In shock, he then went into the bathroom and found a 5th child floating in the tub. Andrea had drowned all 5 of her children. Russell returned home to find it cordoned off by the police. Although the officers briefed him on the tragic events, they were not allowed to enter and view the bodies. Andrea was taken into custody right away, and investigators began looking for explanations for why a mother would kill her 5 children, including a 6-month-old baby. During her police interviews, Andrea admitted to the killings, stating that she filled the bathtub with water with the intention of drowning her children. When medical experts examined Andrea at the facility where she was being held, they found that she had been hearing voices from her head before the incident. She held a religious belief that the number 666 was marked on her scalp, a number linked to the Antichrist, which led her to believe she was a bad mother. One of the experts diagnosed Andrea with cacodemoniomania, a rare condition characterized by the belief that one is possessed by a demon, often seen in people with religious delusions. Andrea loved her children, but she became convinced that messages and her religious beliefs labeled her as Satan, a bad person. Her psychotic tendencies intensified, merged with these beliefs, leaving her in a troubled state. Some of her ideas were also shaped by the writings of a preacher named Michael Warrenicki, whom the Yates family had previously followed. As her mental health deteriorated, Andrea started to believe that one of her sons would grow up to be a serial killer and another one will become an escort. She feared that her other 3 children were also destined to lead bad lives and would go to hell for their sins. When investigators asked Andrea if she thought she was possessed, she replied that she was possessed by Satan, who was urging her to harm her children. When the news broke about the 5 children being found dead in the house, it quickly attracted a lot of media attention, and Andrea Yates became a well-known name. This case ignited widespread interest in the issue of postpartum psychosis. Her lawyer, George Parnham, understood that the only way for Andrea to avoid severe consequences in the trial was to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. Meanwhile, public anger grew as the trial unfolded and more details came to light. Many people, unaware of the seriousness of mental illness, reacted harshly to Andrea, while mental health experts were concerned that she might be prosecuted despite her real mental health challenges. Andrea's actions were shocking to everyone aware of the case, but her mental sanity was still in question. At that time, there was no clear legal definition of mental insanity, so jurors relied on their everyday understanding of the term to determine Andrea's fate. Public reaction was mixed. While many criticized Andrea for her actions, they also expressed anger towards her husband, Russell, for his responses to the murders. Russell spoke to the media, insisting that Andrea was not in her right mind when she took the lives of their children and that her actions stemmed from her mental illness. He repeatedly described Andrea as a loving and devoted mother who should not be punished for her crime. However, public outrage grew against Russell, particularly after the children's funeral just 1 week after the murders, as he did not exhibit the emotions typically expected from a grieving father. Some suspected that he may have been involved in the killings alongside Andrea before her trial even started. Andrea was admitted to the jail's medical facility for treatment of her psychosis. On September 22, 2001, 3 months after the tragic incident, she was judged competent to stand trial for the murders of her children. The state of Texas prepared to pursue the case rigorously, with prosecutors clearly seeking the death penalty for the murder of her 5 children. Additionally, the prosecution intended to argue that Russell Yates was partly responsible for the situation. They claimed his choice to have the family live in a bus and to homeschool the children contributed to Andrea's deteriorating mental health. In February 2002, the trial of Andrea Yates began, where she pleaded not guilty, claiming insanity as her defense. Only a few individuals are excused from criminal responsibility due to severe mental illness. Her defense team believed they could prove that Andrea sometimes lost control over her thoughts and actions. Both the prosecution and the defense called upon notable psychiatrists to support their arguments. The experts agreed on several key points. Andrea drowned her children while suffering from multiple mental illnesses and believed her actions were in her children's best interest. They also acknowledged that she was aware that drowning her children was illegal. The main difference in their testimonies was that, even though she knew it was a crime, she acted on her belief that it was the right decision for her children. Dr. Dietz also explored where Andrea may have found motivation for her actions. He noted that in the week before the incident, Andrea watched an episode of Law and Order in which a woman evades her responsibilities by drowning her children and ultimately gets away with murder. Dr. Dietz suggested that Andrea might have believed she could similarly avoid the repercussions of killing her children. The prosecution contended that there was a method behind Andrea's actions and that they were not purely irrational. Dr. Dietz emphasized that Andrea's actions were not only illegal but also violated societal and moral principles. During the trial, Andrea's doctor, Dr. Said, was frequently mentioned by Russell and his family. They claimed that Dr. Said contributed to the tragedy by incorrectly prescribing Andrea a mix of antidepressants just days before the incident. The trial lasted 3 weeks, and the jury deliberated for nearly 4 hours before reaching a verdict. On March 15, 2002, Andrea Yates was found guilty of murdering her 5 children. Although psychiatrists for both the prosecution and defense agreed that Andrea was severely mentally ill with one of several psychotic disorders at the time she killed her child, the state of Texas asserted that by legal definition she was mentally competent to judge whether her actions were right or wrong, despite her mental impairment. During sentencing, the jury chose not to impose the death penalty, instead sentencing Andrea Yates to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. She was sent to the Mountain View Unit in Gatesville, Texas, a prison for individuals deemed criminally insane. 2 years after her conviction, in August 2004, Russell officially filed for divorce, stating that they had not lived as a happy couple since she killed their children. The family court granted the divorce in March 2005, and Russell married another woman, Laura Arnold, in 2006. Shortly after the verdict in Andrea Yates's case was announced, rumors surfaced suggesting that the Law and Order episode referenced by Dr. Dietz in his testimony did not exist. Andrea's lawyers initiated a search for the episode, but they could not find any record of it. This discovery could potentially allow the defense to request a retrial. Suzanne O'Malley, a journalist who covered the trial for NBC News, the New York Times Magazine, and the Oprah Magazine, had previous experience writing for Law and Order. She confirmed that no episode matching Dr. Dietz's description existed. Defense attorney George then met with Law and Order creator Dick Wolf, who affirmed that no such episode had ever aired or been planned. George subsequently filed for a mistrial. When George asked Dr. Dietz about his reference to the Law and Order show, Dr. Dietz acknowledged that it was an honest mistake he made while testifying. George identified 19 points in his request for a retrial, claiming that Dr. Dietz's inaccurate testimony warranted a new hearing for Andrea Yates's case. The defense did not seek to reduce Andrea's sentence but instead requested that all charges be dismissed, arguing it would constitute double jeopardy to subject her to a second trial 3.5 years after her original conviction. In January 2005, the Texas Court of Appeals ruled that double jeopardy did not apply to Andrea's case. However, the court also decided to grant a new trial for Andrea because Dr. Dietz admitted to having provided false testimony during the first trial. On January 9, 2006, Andrea entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity and requested the court to grant her bail following an appellate court decision. Her conviction was overturned, and she was released on bail on February 1, 2006. As part of the bail conditions, Andrea's attorney arranged for her to be transferred from the Mountain View unit to a mental health treatment facility, where she could receive treatment while waiting for her second trial. During this time, the defense was not only preparing for the trial but also working to inform the public about the events that occurred and to clarify that Andrea was not the monster many believed her to be. In media interviews, Andrea's lawyers highlighted that there were 6 victims in this case. 5 were her children, and the 6th was Andrea herself, who had lost control of her actions due to her deteriorating mental health at the time of the incident. In June 2006, 5 years after the tragedy, Andrea Yates's second trial began. The defense focused on her mental health and whether her actions were considered wrong. By this time, public opinion about the case had settled into a neutral stance. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury reached their verdict. This trial was notable because the jurors requested to see photographs of the children that Andrea had killed, and they observed the 2-minute moment of silence for each of the 5 victims, with some jurors visibly emotional. After a lengthy 5 years since the incident, the jury took 13 hours to deliberate and ultimately found Andrea Yates not guilty by reason of insanity. Russell expressed relief at the verdict, stating that the court recognized Andrea's troubled mental state. Following the court's decision, Andrea Yates was placed under the care of the Department of State Health Services and transferred to the Vernon campus of the North Texas State Hospital. She was later moved to the Kerrville, Texas State Hospital, a low-security mental health facility where she currently lives. There is no set timeline for her release, and it is possible she may remain in the hospital for the rest of her life. Robert Ackerman was born on May 9, 1968, in Stockton, California. From a very young age, he displayed extraordinary intelligence. Even as an infant, he amazed those around him by forming complete sentences, leaving his mother in awe as she witnessed her son's abilities unfold. His brilliance and exceptional grades during elementary school made him stand out. However, during this time, his parents' relationship began to deteriorate. Eventually, his mother, Darlene Bradshaw, decided to leave his father and take him with her in search of a fresh start. The family relocated to Visalia, a city 2 hours from Stockton. This change not only meant a new home but also a new school for the children. Even so, Robert maintained his high academic performance and continued to excel. Meanwhile, his father Kenneth, who lived alone in Stockton, became a bartender. An arrangement led to the brothers being separated for the next 8 years. Robert stayed with his father, while his younger brother, Ken, lived with their mother. Robert's father was not a man who showed affection through warm words or gestures. Instead of expressing his love with hugs or care, he chose to encourage Robert through material rewards. Every time the boy got a high score, his father would give him a gift, which made him always strive to achieve excellence in order to receive recognition from his father. Over time, this method of parenting deeply influenced Robert, instilling in him a strong desire to be recognized and rewarded for his achievements. Even though they lived far apart, Robert's younger brother, Ken, always admired his brother. Ken saw Robert as a leader and a source of inspiration. During his teenage years, Robert set a clear goal for himself: to fulfill his dream of joining the U.S. Air Force. Despite frequently changing schools, which affected his academic performance, Robert still graduated from high school at the age of 17. He then joined the U.S. Air Force and reported to Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, dedicating himself entirely to military training. While others used their free time for leisure and socializing, Robert stayed focused on his training and poured all his energy into self-improvement. His dedication didn't go unnoticed. He became a role model for others struggling to stay motivated and committed to their goals. Robert's determination and abilities earned him significant recognition, and he exceeded the high expectations placed upon him. After 2 years, Robert earned a bachelor's degree while simultaneously studying in the medical field. Having served actively in the Air Force and receiving an honorable discharge in 1988, he continued serving in the reserves until 1993. At the age of 25, he enrolled at Golden Gate University in San Francisco to pursue a master's degree in business administration. He had ambitious plans and envisioned working for another 10 years before retiring at 35. After completing his master's degree, Robert accepted a position with Roadway Trucking, located in San Bernardino County, northwest of Los Angeles. Advent was well known for its convenient location and high reputation. Robert quickly distinguished himself as an outstanding employee in his division. Within 2 years, his boss recommended him for a promotion to efficiency expert. In this role, his job is to evaluate the company's operational performance and improve service quality from end to end. Although Robert enjoyed his job, he felt the financial compensation was inadequate. His boss paid him $40,000 a year, but he felt that this was 20% less than he deserved. Despite some disappointment, he was determined to develop his career with confidence. His parents were immensely proud of his accomplishments, and his brother, Ken, also found success, managing a bar and purchasing a cattle ranch. Their father showed his support by inviting both sons home for a special gathering, where he gifted Robert a cherished family heirloom, a diamond ring he had saved since he was 16. This heartfelt gesture reflected not only his deep love but also his unwavering belief in Robert's ability to achieve all his dreams. By 1994, Robert had always lived according to societal standards and norms. However, he began craving new experiences and decided to visit Las Vegas. While there, he became intrigued by the legendary Palomino Club, a historic venue for celebrities and influential figures during the 1950s and 1960s. At the club, Robert met Alla Kosova, who was originally from Moldova in the former Soviet Union. When she was 14, her family immigrated to the United States in search of a better life. In America, she discovered her passion for dancing and turned it into a profession. She eventually began working at the Palomino Club under the stage name Ecstasy. She loved her job, which provided her both personal fulfillment and financial independence. Robert was mesmerized by Alla's dancing and paid $500 for a private performance. To Alla, it was simply part of her work, and she viewed Robert as just another client. But for Robert, it meant something more. Lacking experience in relationships, he began to believe there could be a deeper connection between them. Captivated by her, he started to visit the club regularly, spending substantial amounts of money just to watch her perform. He also showered her with expensive gifts, including diamond earrings, and took her to luxurious dinners. In his mind, he considered Alla his girlfriend. In early 1995, Robert's workplace underwent restructuring, and his job was at risk. Instead of waiting for the outcome, he decided to quit and focus on developing a computer program, hoping to sell it and start his own business. Despite his financial uncertainty, he continued spending extravagantly on Alla, ignoring the mounting debts on his credit cards. Desperate to keep her in his life, he sought quick ways to earn money, but his efforts only worsened his financial troubles. In an attempt to maintain a presence in Alla's life, Robert calls her and makes up a story about being robbed in New York, thinking she would be more interested in him than material matters. However, he was mistaken. Once Alla realized there was nothing more she could gain financially from him, she severed all ties, even changing her phone number. Alla's departure left Robert deeply devastated. To make matters worse, his software project failed, leaving him without income and an uncertain future. By the summer of 1995, Robert was still struggling with depression and decided to seek help from his loved ones. His first step was reaching out to his mother, Darlene. After explaining his financial difficulties to his mother, she invited him to stay with her family at their home in Visalia, believing their support would help him recover. In early September, Robert moved into his parents' house. At that time, his younger brother Ken was employed at a motel. Upon hearing about Robert's struggles, Ken hoped to rebuild a strong bond with him and began spending more time with him. Ken greatly admired Robert and believed he could overcome any challenge. Meanwhile, Darlene had started dating a man named Art George, who was raising his son, Scott. Scott had grown up in a small community and was known for his cheerful personality and positive outlook on life. He loved water skiing and also enjoyed dancing. Ken and his girlfriend often spent time together on weekends, and Darlene hoped this would give Robert and Scott a chance to connect. Since they were of similar age, she hoped they would find common interests, which might help Robert recover from his depression. Scott turned out to be a great source of support for Robert. The two began spending time together in the evenings, boating, taking walks by the lake, and water skiing. They quickly developed a close friendship, which delighted both Darlene and Art. However, Robert couldn't stop thinking about his desire to win back his ex-girlfriend, Alla. He became convinced he needed money urgently to regain her affection. This belief led him to contemplate committing a robbery. Shockingly, the idea took hold in his mind, and for the first time, Robert, who had always followed the law, decided to obtain a firearm. In October 1995, Scott was going through a tough time. His girlfriend had just left him, and he desperately wanted someone to talk to about his pain. On October 3rd, he asked Robert to meet him at a bar. Throughout the evening, Scott talked non-stop about what was troubling him. Robert, however, only pretended to listen as his mind remained preoccupied with his own financial and relationship problems. Later that night, while the two were walking home, Robert, overwhelmed by frustration, suddenly pulled out a weapon and attacked Scott. To cover up the crime, he transported the body to a wooded area and disposed of it by throwing it into an abandoned mine shaft. When Scott failed to respond to calls and remained out of contact for several hours, his mother, Art, grew worried, as this behavior was unusual for her son. After waiting until morning, she reported Scott missing to the police. Investigators interviewed Scott's family and friends, including Robert. During questioning, Robert claimed that he and Scott had spent time at the bar before heading home. Over the next month, Robert was interrogated 3 more times. Realizing he was at risk of being arrested, he decided to act. He traded his car for a rented truck and persuaded Darlene to move with him to Medford, Oregon. After arriving in Medford, Robert and Darlene began searching for a place to live. While searching for a suitable house through real estate brokers, they got in touch with a real estate agency owned by Roxanne Ellis and Michelle Abdil. Roxanne was born on November 4, 1942, in Amarillo, Texas, to Roy Charles Wagner and Mary Cameron Wagner. She was known as compassionate and always willing to help others. She had previously been married and, in 1965, had her first child, a daughter named Lori Alice. They also had a son, though little information is available about him. In the early 1980s, she divorced her husband and decided to start fresh. She moved to Colorado with her children and soon secured a job at a prestigious medical clinic specializing in obstetrics. It was there that she met Michelle, marking a turning point in her life. Michelle was born on July 8, 1953, in Roseburg, Douglas County, Oregon, to George Abdil and Ninette Jins. Her parents raised her with love and care. According to her relatives, she grew up to be kind, optimistic, intelligent, and energetic. She brought joy to those around her. After starting her job at the clinic, Michelle developed a close friendship with Roxanne. Over time, this bond grew stronger and eventually led to their engagement. However, their relationship faced disapproval from the residents of Colorado Springs, who were opposed to same-sex relationships. After much thought, they decided to move to Medford with Lori, as Michelle's mother had recently opened a real estate agency there. Although some friends had warned them that Medford was even more conservative than Colorado Springs, they thought that the atmosphere of a small town, where everyone knows each other, would promote friendly and supportive relationships. Michelle and Roxanne quickly earned the respect of Medford residents with their dedication and strong principles. They were soon elected to the city church council. Wasting no time, they renovated an old house they had purchased, transforming it into a beautiful home. Later, when Lori had her first daughter, they embraced their roles as loving grandmothers while continuing to manage the real estate agency, creating a warm and welcoming environment for their clients. When Robert approached Roxanne looking for housing, she offered him a free house in the Sheridan Court complex. However, they couldn't come to an agreement, and Robert and his mother rented a different house. This brief interaction, however, planted a dark idea in Robert's mind. On December 4, 1995, Robert contacted Roxanne again, requesting to see the house she had previously shown him. He didn't identify himself, and Roxanne didn't ask for his name. The agency usually kept records of appointments, but this time Roxanne only recorded the time and place of the meeting. Around 11 a.m. that day, she arrived at the specified location and found Robert waiting for her. Once inside the house, Robert pulled out a weapon he had recently purchased and began threatening her, demanding a $50,000 check. He tied her up but soon realized his plan wouldn't work since the check required Michelle's signature for approval. Frustrated, Robert pressured Roxanne to call Michelle and lie, claiming her car battery was dead, to lure Michelle there. His plan worked. When Michelle arrived, Robert ambushed her and tied her up with tape, just as he had done with Roxanne. Unable to obtain the money, he forced them into a car and took them to a garage. There, He made them get into Roxanne's silver pickup truck and attacked them with a silenced gun, killing them instantly. He then placed their bodies in the trunk of a Toyota. Acting quickly, Robert drove to a location linked to a house that Roxanne had recently shown to a client. Meanwhile, Lori noticed her mother Roxanne's car parked near the property, but as she approached, the driver sped off, raising her suspicions. Concerned, Lori followed the car, determined to find her mother. The car eventually stopped, and as Lori got out of her vehicle to investigate, Robert restarted his car and sped away, leaving her alone and filled with worry. Lori returned to the parking lot and found Michelle's car. Michelle's belongings were still inside, but there was no sign of her, which terrified Lori. Realizing something was seriously wrong, she immediately reported the situation to the police. Just 5 meters from where the car containing the bodies was abandoned, Robert returned home to his mother. That evening, detectives visited the rental property and inspected Roxanne's car at the scene. However, they found no evidence of violence, no blood, biological traces, signs of a struggle, or any indication of what had happened to Roxanne and Michelle. Neighbors reported seeing a strange man entering and leaving the vacant property that night. They described him to the police, who used the information to create a composite sketch that was later published in newspapers and aired on television. Worried that his crime might soon be exposed, Robert told his mother he had found a job in Los Angeles and would be leaving shortly. The disappearance of Roxanne and Michelle was solved on December 7th. A cable repair worker noticed a thick, reddish liquid dripping from under the chassis of a pickup truck. Curious, he approached to investigate and found the bodies of the 2 women in the trunk, partially concealed by cardboard boxes. Shocked by the discovery, he immediately reported the incident to the police. When the police arrived at the scene and conducted their investigation, they found that the repairman closely matched the sketch of the suspect. He was promptly arrested. Upon searching the vehicle, detectives concluded robbery was unlikely, as nothing valuable was missing. Blood tests confirmed that Roxanne and Michelle had been shot inside the truck, and 4 bullet casings were found. No fingerprints were found, but male footprints were spotted near the scene. Forensic analysis revealed green polyester fibers around the wounds, indicating that the shooter used a blanket or similar material to muffle the gunshots. Additionally, Roxanne had a cut on her leg from tape used to tie her up. Using this evidence, investigators pieced together the sequence of incidents from Roxanne's home to the garage and, ultimately, to the truck. Believing fingerprints might still be present on the tape, investigators examined it using infrared light and chemicals. They successfully retrieved 2 clear prints, which did not match the detained electrician, clearing him of suspicion. While one team investigated the crime scene, another traced phone calls made to Roxanne. The calls were linked to the Tiki Lodge motel. However, issues with the motel's phone records made it impossible to determine the exact room or caller. With 30 occupied rooms, most paid for in cash by transient guests, identifying the perpetrator became an exceptionally difficult task. At that time, Darlene, Robert's mother, began to worry that her son might be involved in the murder that had shocked the public. Her fears were confirmed when she saw a composite sketch of the suspect on television, which left her horrified. Choosing to fulfill her civic duty, Darlene decided not to shield her son and contacted the police. She provided her address, which was near the location where the car in question had been found, and informed authorities that Robert had left for California. Investigators began running a background check on Robert but found no immediate signs of trouble. However, upon reviewing his purchases, they uncovered a link to the Tiki Lodge motel. This discovery prompted detectives to alert California authorities, noting that Robert had previously been questioned in connection with another disappearance. As the investigation progressed, Robert attempted to evade capture, aware that he was being followed. He moved from town to town, from Wythe to Stockton, to stay ahead of the authorities. However, Oregon Police Lieutenant Tim Doney kept a close eye on his credit card transactions. His most recent transaction was eventually traced to a motel. At the same time, Kenneth, Robert's father and Darlene's ex-husband, also decided to cooperate with the police to assist in finding their son. On December 13th, Kenneth called the police to report that he had seen Robert in the city. Working alongside special forces, the authorities launched an operation to arrest Robert. They found him in a motel room in Stockton. During the raid, officers confiscated Robert's sports bag, which contained a stun gun, handcuffs, a roll of tape, and a pistol equipped with a homemade silencer. Blood traces were discovered inside the pistol barrel and were sent for forensic analysis. During his initial interrogation, Robert admitted to the crime without showing any remorse. He claimed that his original plan was to rob the victims, but everything went wrong. He confessed to murdering Scott, explaining that he wanted to know what it felt like to take a life. Investigators were shocked by Robert's attitude and lack of regret. He even mocked the victims, only expressing regret about being caught. DNA testing later confirmed that the blood found in the barrel of the pistol belonged to Roxanne and Michelle. Robert's fingerprints matched those found on the tape, and his shoe prints matched those found at the crime scene. Based on this evidence, Robert was charged with aggravated murder, first-degree kidnapping, and robbery. He was held in Sankin jail while awaiting trial. On December 18th, during a conversation with his father, Kenneth, Robert revealed where Scott's body had been disposed of. Kenneth passed this information to the police, who then located Scott's remains at the indicated site. The discovery devastated Scott's family, who had endured prolonged uncertainty. For those who knew Robert, his transformation from a smart, successful man to someone capable of such terrible crimes was deeply unsettling. Investigators sought to gather more details about his personality as they prepared to extradite him to Oregon for the trial in the Roxanne case. By January 1996, while imprisoned in Medford, Robert suddenly changed his stance and claimed he was innocent. His defense team filed a motion to overturn the death penalty in Oregon. However, several months later, on September 11, 1996, Robert again pleaded guilty to the murders of Roxanne and Michelle, which were committed with particular cruelty, as well as to charges of kidnapping and robbery. The investigation determined that Roxanne and Michelle had died under aggravated circumstances. Robert was sentenced to an additional 6 months in prison for kidnapping and robbery. A separate trial regarding related charges was held on September 23, 1997. During the trial, it was revealed that Robert had committed the murders with extreme cruelty, driven by his desire to continue robbing and killing others to sustain his lifestyle and support Allah. The prosecution argued that the death penalty was necessary. During the defense, Robert's lawyer described him as a man in anguish, trying to find meaning in life after significant losses, sparking heated debate about the application of the death penalty as well as the potential for human rehabilitation and redemption. On October 27, 1997, the jury unanimously found Robert guilty of intentionally murdering Roxanne and Michelle, deeming him a serious threat to society. The trial court concurred, sentencing him to death. He was sent to Oregon State Penitentiary. In 2002, Robert faced another trial in California for the murder of Scott George. He was found guilty and received a second death sentence. Early during his imprisonment, Robert complained about hearing voices and claimed that he had a transmitter implanted that allowed others to control him. In February 2011, an Oregon court deemed him unfit to stand trial due to his inappropriate behavior, commuting his death sentence in Oregon to life imprisonment without parole. However, his death sentence in California remained in effect, keeping him on death row. In 2018, prison staff discovered Robert dead in his cell. A forensic investigation later determined that he had died of natural causes. Robert's transformation shocked those who had known him. Once a talented boy with extraordinary intellect and a model soldier, he became a murderer who showed no regard for human life. A diamond ring, a keepsake from Robert's once successful career, was left at his father Kenneth's house after Robert lost everything and committed murder. To Kenneth, the ring served as a bittersweet reminder of a brilliant past that could never be reclaimed.